Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through the creaking, splintery door of a medieval tavern. An absolute vortex of chaos, ale, and suspicious meat pies. You're not a noble, not a peasant either, just someone in the messy, mud-caked middle. You've walked for hours, maybe even days, and your boots are more holes than leather. Your stomach's gnawing at itself. But here, right now, you're looking for warmth, a drink, maybe a story or two that won't end in your arrest. You probably won't survive this, to be clear. The odds of a full night in a medieval tavern without being scammed, poisoned, mugged, or accidentally recruited for a holy war? Practically zero. But hey, who wants a safe bedtime story? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and what time you're tuning in. I want to know where this global tavern of ours is filling up from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The door gives a low, grumbling creak as you push it open with your shoulder. It doesn't swing so much as groan. The wooden latch scratches against the stone wall as you slip inside, ducking beneath a crooked beam. Your eyes adjust slowly. It's dark, much darker than you expected, and there's a pungent warmth that wraps around you instantly. Sweat, wood smoke, stale ale, and damp wool blend into one overwhelming slap of welcome. You've barely stepped 2 feet in and already someone's bumped your shoulder. Hard. No apology. Just a grunt and the stink of garlic and old beer. You look around. It's cramped, shoulder to shoulder with men and women in rough-spun tunics and fraying cloaks, each trying to shout louder than the next. Tankards slam against tables. Laughter turns to yelling and back to laughter again. Someone's trying to climb onto a table and failing with loud determination. The floor beneath you is sticky and uneven, straw half covering the stonework. It squelches a bit underfoot, and you don't want to guess what's mixed in with the hay. Over by the hearth, a blackened pot bubbles ominously, watched closely by an old cook who may or may not be missing an eye. There are no empty seats. None. You stand awkwardly near the door as a group of cloaked travellers huddle around a table that looks like it was one argument away from collapsing. A few stools are occupied by sleeping drunks, heads back, mouths open, snoring to the rhythm of tavern life. You're going to have to wait your turn, or be bold. Your cloak is dust-streaked and still damp at the hem. Rain, you think, or maybe someone's chamber pot above the alley let loose. Either way, you're not walking back out there. The fire crackles, and you can feel the heat drawing you in like a moth to a sweaty, violent flame. You spot the innkeeper behind the bar, a barrel of a man with a red nose, thick beard, and arms like hams. He's not serving. He's barking orders at a teenage boy who's already dropped 2 tankards and is desperately wiping the floor with what is definitely someone's old shirt. You spot a shadow shifting in the corner, a hooded figure nursing a drink. The hood hides their face completely, but they've definitely been watching you since you walked in. You don't make eye contact. Not yet. It's too early in the night for mysteries. Someone lurches past you, spilling half a mug of dark ale down your sleeve. "Welcome to the Pig's Tusk," he slurs, chuckling at his own joke. There is no sign on the door, no carved name. It might not be called the Pig's Tusk, but you're not about to correct him. He waves his mug in the air and yells something to the barmaid, who does not acknowledge him. She doesn't even glance. You're starting to realise this place runs on a brutal, silent pecking order. This is no fantasy tavern from a storybook. There's no glint of polished brass or cheerful firelight here. It's smoke-stained beams, sour breath, and the soft, rhythmic sound of someone vomiting behind a barrel near the back. And yet, there's something electric here, a charged sense of possibility. Maybe it's the firelight flickering against rough stone walls. Maybe it's the quiet promise of stories unfolding at every table, some truthful, most not. Maybe it's that you haven't been stabbed yet, and your expectations were just that low. Historically speaking, this might be a taberna, in the Latin-rooted sense. Not just a bar, but a home-adjacent hub for drink, gossip, and bad decisions. Real medieval taverns weren't glamorous. They were local, practical, often illegal. The church frowned on them, hard, but people still gathered here, breaking bread and heads alike. Drinking wasn't just social, it was survival. The water could kill you faster than the ale. So the weak beer served here. It's your safest bet. Quirky fact, some taverns in medieval England used poles hung with ivy, or wreaths of twigs above their doors to signal they had ale for sale. No name, no signage, just a bush on a stick. If the bush was out, you were in luck. If not, walk on or drink out of a ditch. There's still debate among historians whether these taverns served as proto-newsrooms, or if that's romanticising them too much. Some argue they were where revolutions brewed in mugs and mines. Others say it was mostly just spilled drinks and lice. Back in the room, the hooded figure finally rises. They move slowly, deliberately. Their boots make no sound on the stone. You don't want this. You don't want to be part of a subplot. But too late. Your eyes meet. Just for a second. They nod once, then turn away. Across the room, someone drops a tray. The sound rings out like a warning bell. You finally spot a free bench wedged between two men deep in debate about oxen or maybe taxes. Either way, they're arguing with alarming intensity. You make your move, weaving through the crowd, dodging elbows and sloshing cups. You slide into the space just as someone else eyes it from across the room. You made it, seat secured, no one's tried to rob you yet. No fights near your table, yet. And the fire is close enough to warm your toes. It's only your first 5 minutes inside this medieval tavern, and already you're part of the chaos. You don't fully sit. You hover, one hand still on the table, ready to spring if someone claims the spot with more confidence or bigger fists. But the two men beside you don't even flinch. One is older, with half his beard singed off and a scar that looks like it was carved with a dull spoon. The other is younger, but already going bald, with the sort of twitchy eyes that suggest he's always calculating the odds of a fight and whether he can win it. They barely glance at you. That's good. That's safe. And then it hits you. The smell. Not like a slow drift of bad air, but a full-on ambush. It's so sudden you actually recoil a bit, trying to figure out what part of your body just betrayed you, but it's not you. It's everything else. A thick stew of sour beer, week-old mutton grease, human musk, wet dog, and possibly dead rat. Cooked together in the humid, heat-choked air, you breathe shallowly, through your mouth, and instantly regret that too. The ale fumes make it feel like your tongue is being gently pickled. The fire adds to it, pushing waves of smoke into the rafters, where they mix with whatever black mould is growing along the wooden beams. Someone passes behind you, and you swear the air bends with a scent so foul you briefly question your will to live. Is not that anyone here is trying to smell bad, is that they don't even register it. Bathing? A luxury. Perfume? Maybe for nobles or high-end courtesans. For everyone else, it's layers of sweat and the perfume of effort. Clothes are rarely washed, and when they are, it's in cold water and lye, then dried next to whatever dung fire was convenient. You catch a whiff of someone who smells like old onions and horse saddle. Another has a scent of spoiled milk and smoke, and someone very close by, probably the man to your right, smells like he lost a bet with a pig and never changed afterward. Historically, most medieval towns didn't have functioning sewer systems as we think of them today. Waste, human and animal, went into the street or a ditch behind the building. Some taverns had cesspits, some had chamber pots dumped out windows. If you were lucky, there was a latrine out back with a strong enough draft to keep the worst of the stench away. Here, the smell suggests that maybe, just maybe, the back room's full. A tavern's interior was usually simple. One open room, long benches, maybe a small loft if the owner rented beds or hay piles. The walls are plastered wattle and daub, essentially mud and sticks. A few rusty sconces hold candles made of tallow, which is just a fancy word for animal fat that smells like regret when it burns. The light they give off is more shadow than flame, flickering wildly every time someone walks past. Quirky detail. Some taverns hung bundles of herbs from the ceiling beams, not for decoration but to combat the smell. Not that it worked. A bunch of rosemary isn't going to stand a chance against 50 unwashed bodies in wool cloaks sweating over boiled cabbage. A woman walks past you carrying a tray with 4 pewter mugs, her boots sloshing through the straw on the floor. You don't miss how the liquid inside the mugs wobbles like it's more porridge than drink. She yells something to a man near the bar, something about getting paid for last week, and he answers with a burp that seems legally offensive. Someone else throws a chicken leg across the room. No one reacts. You're still half holding your breath when the man on your left snorts, eyes bloodshot and watery. He glances at you, nose wrinkled, and mutters, "What? First time in a tavern?" Before draining the last of his drink and wiping his mouth on his sleeve, you nod, trying to look tougher than you feel. The smell is everywhere now, in your clothes, your hair, your paws. It sticks like honey, only evil, You imagine walking out of here and still smelling it tomorrow, maybe even days from now. You wonder if this is the kind of smell that seeps into your soul. There's an open fire pit near the back wall, where a few iron pots hang over low flames. The cook stirs one with a spoon that could double as a paddle. The stew looks thick and grey-brown, like something you'd use to fill a pothole, not your stomach. Steam rises in lazy curls, catching the light as it hits the cold air that leaks in from the door. Occasionally, someone walks up and mumbles a few words to the cook, exchanges a few coins and gets a chipped bowl in return. No one looks excited about it, but they eat anyway. Hunger wins. You shift slightly on the bench and your hand brushes something sticky. You don't look. Nothing good has ever come from identifying medieval tavern goo. You wipe it on your cloak and move on. An open scholarly debate among historians revolves around how communal these taverns really were. Some claim they were the democratic spaces of the lower classes, a place where everyone could drink and gripe and plot. Others argue they were strictly segmented by class, gender and trade, with little mixing. Based on the smell and the shouting here, it seems like anyone with coin, or the promise of it, can squeeze their way and you spot what might be a minor merchant by the velvet trim on his sleeves, sitting shoulder to shoulder with a woodcutter still in his apron. Across the room, two women in colourful kerchiefs argue over something in a basket. One of them is missing several teeth. They laugh, then immediately start arguing again. It's not just the smell that fills the air, it's sound. Not the pleasant hum of chatter, but an overwhelming roar of half-drunk voices trying to rise over each other. Arguments, laughter, curses, clinking mugs, slurred songs. It all blends into one living noise that seems to vibrate in your ribs. You realise you're shouting when you ask if the barmaid is coming back, and even then, no one hears you. Somewhere behind the bar, a door creaks open and a dog trots out. It's mangy, one eye clouded, tail wagging slowly. It sniffs a dropped crust on the floor, then lifts a leg and pees against the wall. No one stops it. No one cares. You lean back slightly, letting your shoulders sag. You're in it now. There's no going back to the clean, quiet illusion you carried with you. This is real. This is the medieval tavern. Filthy, loud, wild. And it's only just starting to come alive. You're still sitting there, mildly stunned, when a hand brushes your coin pouch. It's subtle, almost graceful, like a soft breeze over your belt, but not subtle enough. Your reflexes, dulled by travel and the tavern's intoxicating stench, still kick in fast enough to slap the fingers away before the thief can make off with your hard-earned coppers. The hand recoils, quick and practiced, disappearing into the crowd before you even catch a proper look. Just a flash of a threadbare sleeve, a soot-darkened cuff, and then gone. You blink. Well, that didn't take long. Pickpockets are like mice in these places, constant, invisible until they want to be. They slink between the stools and benches, brushing past drunkards and day labourers with the soft touch of someone who's had a lifetime of practice. They're usually young, kids mostly, or old enough to seem harmless. The smart ones don't look like thieves, they look like customers. You get the sense they've already cased you up and down. You're new, alone, tired. That makes you a glowing target. The older man next to you chuckles into his tankard. "Don't let it bother you," he mumbles. "If they take it, they needed it more than you." He snorts, then adds, "Besides, they'll spend it here anyway." Goes full circle, doesn't it? You check your pouch. It's still there, still weighted with coin, thank the saints. But now your hand stays close to your belt. You eye everyone around you a little more suspiciously. The smiling woman with the tray of stew. The man playing dice alone at a corner table. Even the drunk curled at your feet like a discarded bedroll. Any one of them could have gone for your purse, and maybe still will. That's the thing about a medieval tavern. It's a great equaliser, but also a trap. Everyone's packed in together, rich next to poor, merchant beside mercenary. But that doesn't mean everyone plays fair. It's survival first, manners second. Actually, scratch that. Manners don't make the list at all. You shift your position, one hand now resting on your pouch, the other still on the table's edge, which is sticky in a way that suggests it's been varnished with a mix of spilled beer and meat grease. A serving girl passes close to you and nods, her expression blank and efficient. She's carrying an empty tray and dodges a drunken grab from a young man seated near the hearth, with a smooth sidestep born of endless repetition. She doesn't even blink. You get the feeling she could kill someone with a bread knife and still keep refilling mugs. You raise your hand slightly, she catches it, nods once and disappears toward the bar with a quick pivot. You're not sure what you ordered, but something will show up. That's how it works here. You don't ask for specific drinks, you ask for a drink and hope it doesn't kill you. Historically, medieval taverns operated on a strange kind of informal chaos. There were no menus, no pricing boards, no itemised receipts. If you were a regular, you might get a better pour. If you were new, you paid more, got less, and hoped your food didn't wink at you when it arrived. Taverns like this were often family-run. Someone brewed the ale out back, someone stirred the stew, someone made sure the pig in the yard didn't eat the firewood. If the tavern had rooms upstairs, someone probably rented those too, and you paid in coin, favours, or whatever barter you had on hand. You glance around. Most of the faces here are regulars. You can tell by the way they lean into each other's stories, the way they laugh just a little too early, already knowing the punchlines. There's a rhythm to it all. Shouts become laughter. Laughter becomes argument. Argument becomes a thrown mug. The mug either shatters or bounces, and then it all starts over again. You watch a scrawny teenager wander through the crowd with a tiny wooden board. On it are 6 old dice and a hand-painted sign that just says try. That's it. No rules, no stakes listed. He sets up near the bar and a small group gathers. The game's simple. Roll 6s and win. Don't roll 6s and pay. The odds are worse than bad, and yet coins flash, hands move fast, and every so often the boy collects with a smile that could curdle fresh milk. You half rise to watch, then sit again when the man to your right coughs a warning. Don't gamble unless you're willing to lose fingers, he mutters, or worse, owe favours. It's not an exaggeration. In some towns, tavern gambling led to knife fights in alleys, or worse, being pressed into service, on a ship, in a war, in a scheme someone swore would make you rich by next market day. Spoiler, it never does. Quirky fact. In some 14th century taverns, it wasn't uncommon to see gaming boards carved directly into the tables. That way, no one could accuse the tavern of hosting illegal dice games. It was just decor. Totally innocent. Authorities knew, of course, but they had their own mugs to keep full. There's debate about whether taverns were more dangerous than brothels in terms of criminal activity. Some historians argue that taverns, being more accessible, were more volatile, places where the unemployed and underfed could stir each other into a mob over bad stew and unpaid taxes. Others say brothels, often state-monitored and taxed, were more strictly controlled, while taverns were chaotic free-for-alls. Based on the man currently yelling something about goats and tariffs near the fire, you're leaning toward chaos. The barmaid returns, setting a wooden mug in front of you with a heavy thunk. It sloshes. The liquid inside is amber brown and slightly fizzy. You lift it cautiously and take a sip. It's warm. Not hot, not cold, just unsettlingly body temperature. There's a strange tang, like apples that have given up on life. It's ale, barely but drinkable. You take a longer sip and feel it hit your stomach like a small, slow-moving avalanche. Then you realise what's really happening. The man to your left is eyeing your mug. His is empty. You see the flicker of thought in his eyes. One less sip for you, one more for him, if he times it right. But he doesn't make a move. Not yet. You angle your body slightly, reclaiming the personal space you can in a place that has no concept of it. The tavern continues to breathe and groan around you. Laughter rises from one table, a muttered threat from another. Somewhere nearby, a stool collapses under someone's weight. No one helps. The man laughs, rolls onto his side and keeps singing. You keep your pouch close. You keep your back against the wall. You sip the ale, letting it warm your belly even as the mug handle sticks to your fingers. You're not relaxed. Not yet. But you're surviving. That's more than most can say on their first night. The barmaid doesn't return. Not right away, at least. She disappears into the swirl of bodies and flickering shadows, absorbed by the rhythm of clanking tankards and shouted orders, and you're left nursing your tepid ale like it's a sacred relic. It's not good, but it's something. It tastes vaguely of apples and regret, probably brewed in someone's barn using questionable fruit and faith alone. But it dulls the ache in your legs and warms your fingers just enough to stop the trembling. You take another sip, slightly better, or maybe your standards are just collapsing. You lean forward a little, forearms on the table, and scan the room. It's starting to fill in your mind like a puzzle. The layout, the patterns, that corner, locals, same cloaks, same laughter, same inside jokes. Near the hearth, travellers, mercenaries and outlaws pretending to be merchants. That table by the back wall? The dangerous kind. They haven't moved much. They haven't smiled once. Every one of them is watching the room like it's a chessboard, and they already know how it ends. You keep your gaze casual, drifting. If you make eye contact for too long in a place like this, it's taken as a challenge or an invitation, sometimes both, and rarely good. The guy across from you makes a show of sharpening a knife on the heel of his boot. His eyes flick up once, just long enough to let you know it's not for decoration. Your own table is a mixed lot. The scarred man to your right is now snoring into his chest, his tankard dangerously tilted toward his lap. The younger, twitchy one has launched into a monologue about grain prices and how the entire feudal system is designed to rob good men blind. You nod occasionally, not because you agree, but because disagreement feels like a health risk. And just as your head starts to relax a little, just as you think the worst might be over, someone thumps into your shoulder from behind. Hard. You twist, instinct kicking in again, but it's not a thief this time. It's a tall, broad-shouldered man in a travel-worn cloak. He stinks like horse sweat and iron. He doesn't apologise, just plants himself beside your table and drops his bag with a loud, wet slap onto the floor. He eyes you, then the bench, then your drink. "Room here," he grunts like it's a courtesy. You nod before your brain catches up. He slides in with a grunt and a sigh, stretching his legs under the table and almost kicking the snoring man. From the shape of the bag and the way his cloak shifts, you can tell he's carrying weapons, at least two, probably more. One dagger at the hip, maybe a short sword under the cloak, possibly a crossbow in the bag. He reeks of dried blood and old saddle leather. He might be a mercenary, might be something worse. His fingers are covered in faded scars, some old, some fresh. You don't ask. Historically speaking, taverns weren't just places for peasants and farmers to get sloppy drunk. They were crossroads. Information, goods, and violence all passed through these doors in equal measure. Mercenaries, adventurers, highwaymen, every kind of rogue and wanderer eventually found their way to one. Sometimes for a drink, sometimes for work, sometimes just to disappear. Your new tablemate pulls a strip of dried meat from a pouch and chews it slowly, staring straight ahead. You sip your ale. No one speaks. A barmaid finally swings past and he grunts something you don't catch. She returns with a pitcher of the same dubious ale and sets it down with practiced disinterest. He doesn't thank her, just fills a cracked mug and downs it in 3 swallows. Then he exhales loudly like he's just expelled the ghosts of 100 bad decisions. Then finally he speaks. "You from around here?" You could lie. You could tell him you're just passing through. But something in his tone suggests he already knows, so you nod slightly. "First time in this place." He grunts again. Might be approval, might be gas. You can't tell. "You should watch your purse," he mutters. "Girl by the stairs. She's already made 3 rounds." You glance discreetly toward the steps near the far wall. A young girl, probably no older than 13, is weaving through the tables with the natural grace of someone born into the trade. Too clean to be a beggar. Too dirty to be a guest. Her eyes are sharp, her fingers quicker. She catches your glance and immediately looks away, blending into the crowd again. It's like watching a fox in a henhouse. Only the fox knows exactly how to smile at the farmer. Quirky little truth. In many medieval towns, pickpocketing wasn't just tolerated, it was organised. Gangs operated in and around popular taverns, often paying a cut to the innkeeper for turning a blind eye. Some even worked under guild-like systems where thieves had rules, ranks and shared profits. Oddly formal for a crime syndicate. The man beside you, still unnamed, still terrifying, takes another long pull from his mug. "Not a bad place," he says finally, almost to himself. "Better than the last one I stayed in. That one had rats the size of cats. One of them stole my boot." You almost laugh. Almost. There's still an open scholarly debate about the level of criminality inside taverns. Were they dens of vice and theft, as the church claimed, or just lively community spaces where things occasionally got out of hand? Modern historians are divided. Some see them as proto-democratic forums. Others say that's just nostalgic nonsense, and that most taverns were just loud, dirty and dangerous, based on the guy currently being forcibly ejected through the back door by 2 bouncers, one of whom is named Shoulders, apparently. You're inclined to believe the latter. Your new companion notices the same thing and smirks. "Don't steal from the owner's daughter," he says. as if it's the moral of a bedtime fable. You glance back toward the hearth, where the fire is now roaring high enough to throw strange dancing shadows across the ceiling. A small crowd has gathered near it, half watching the flames, half watching each other. That's the real pulse of the place. You can feel it now. This tavern isn't just a building, it's a living thing. It breathes with every argument, it growls with every spilled mug. It waits, quietly, for the next bad decision to step through its door. The man beside you taps the edge of the table once, hard. You look over. He doesn't say anything else, just gives a slow nod and downs the rest of his ale, before sliding the mug back into the centre of the table. Then he stands, picks up his bag, and vanishes into the crowd without another word. You sit in his wake, unsure if you just met a friend, a warning or an omen. You're left staring at his empty mug, a smear of something brownish near the rim, like a farewell kiss from a particularly unsanitary ghost. The bench creaks from his absence, but you stay put, ears still ringing faintly from his voice, or maybe from the sudden silence he left in his wake. It's quieter now, though not actually quiet. The volume of the tavern rises and falls like a drunken tide, washing over your senses, and right now, that tide is pulling back. You take another sip of your ale. It's starting to go flat. Not that it was ever fizzy, but now it has the sullen stillness of something giving up on life. You set the mug down and notice that someone, at some point, has carved a crude depiction of a very confident chicken into the wood of the table. It has a sword and wings. You trace the groove with your finger, amused and faintly concerned. Someone had a story. You kind of want to hear it. But your focus shifts when you realise someone's staring at you. No, not someone. Multiple someones. 3 men at a nearby table, one already half drunk and loud, the other 2 quieter, watching. It's that kind of watching that doesn't blink. You know it when you feel it, like the air between you suddenly got thick. One of them nods at the other, and you brace for whatever's coming, and then nothing. They just keep watching, talking, drinking. You look away first. That's the game here. Stares are currency. Hold too long and you're paying. Avoid completely and you're marked as prey. Best to hover in that murky middle, just aware enough to not get caught off guard, but not enough to start something you're not ready to finish. Warm ale, cold looks, that's the exchange rate tonight. You slide back slightly on the bench, letting the heat from the hearth reach your boots. The warmth feels good, a reminder that your feet still exist. You watch a man near the fire take off his boots, massive, crusted things, and immediately offend the entire left half of the room. A chorus of curses, coughs, and one dramatic retch follow. He shrugs, wiggles his toes, and begins humming a song about goats that may or may not be legal to sing in most regions. The scent that wafts your way is not ideal, a mix of cheese, feet, and the general despair of travel. You shift positions again, discreetly pulling your cloak over your nose. Someone near the bar yells for more ale, and the barmaid flips him the medieval equivalent of a rude gesture before disappearing into the back. The man doesn't seem offended. In fact, he looks proud, like he's just been knighted by a goddess of sarcasm, and that's the mood here. Tension wrapped in familiarity. Everyone's 2 pints from joy or violence, and sometimes both. You watch as one man leans forward too far and accidentally dips his sleeve in someone else's stew. A brief silence, then a bellow, a shove, a threatening stand, and then laughter. Both men slap each other's shoulders like old friends. Crisis averted. For now. Historically, taverns functioned as both watering holes and pressure valves. People drank not just for pleasure, but to forget, to loosen the burdens of daily life. The average medieval peasant worked from dawn to dusk, often for barely enough food to survive. A night at the tavern was a ritual, almost sacred in its relief. Even if the ale was barely alcoholic by modern standards, sometimes closer to murky breadwater, it carried the weight of tradition, of routine, of hard-earned escape. But don't mistake these patrons for simple drunks. There's a strategy here, a rhythm. You can see it in the way certain men drink quickly early on, then nurse their mugs for hours, or how others swap drinks with friends, hedging their sobriety in case things go sideways. There's an art to drinking without tipping over into vulnerability. You're halfway through your mug when the older man who was snoring beside you suddenly jolts awake, snorting like a startled ox. His eyes roll around in his head before focusing, somewhat, on you. "Did I miss the king's visit?" he asks, voice slurred but somehow theatrical. You blink. He chuckles, revealing a shocking number of remaining teeth, most of them stained the colour of despair. Knew it. He never shows. Then he slams his tankard down and waves a hand in the air, possibly summoning ale or the ghost of a better decade. The barmaid, of course, ignores him. "Name's Robart," he slurs. 2 B's, because my mum loved bees. Or beer. Hard to tell. He squints at you, then at your mug, then reaches toward it like he might help himself. You block his hand with your forearm in a way that feels polite but final. He snorts again, this time with amusement. "City folk," he mutters, then leans back, letting out a sigh that smells like onions and mothballs. You realise then that conversations in taverns are rarely linear. People start in the middle, end before the beginning, and expect you to keep up. You could try to ask Robart where he's from, but odds are he'd answer with a limerick about turnips and someone named Marjorie. Still, you decide to risk it. "You live near here?" He eyes you. "I sleep wherever the ale runs, friend." Then, after a long pause, "Sometimes in the stables, sometimes in the stocks. Both got their charm." You almost ask what charm the stocks offer, but wisely choose silence. There's a clatter from behind. Someone's dropped a mug. It rolls across the floor and lands at your feet, spilling its final inch of ale. You pick it up and place it on the table next to the empty bowls and crumbs of past meals. Robart nods approvingly. "That's the tavern spirit," he says. The phrase sticks with you. The tavern spirit. A strange, chaotic, grimy kind of camaraderie. People here won't share their bread, but they'll share stories. They won't give you their seat, but they'll pass you the ale if you're brave enough to ask. Trust is rare, but participation? That's the rule. Quirky historical aside, it wasn't uncommon for certain taverns to have their own local laws, spoken or otherwise. House rules. For example, no singing after midnight, no weapons on the table, no kicking the innkeeper's dog, break them. And you weren't just scolded, you were banned. Or worse, publicly mocked by way of rude songs and goat-based nicknames. There's still academic squabbling about how strictly enforced these rules were. Some say they kept taverns from spiralling into bloodbaths nightly. Others argue they were mostly performance, a way for owners to pretend they had control. Watching the barmaid dodge a hurled sausage with inhuman precision, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. You stretch your legs under the table. One foot knocks against a bottle. Empty. Probably. You nudge it aside and glance toward the door. It's been an hour, maybe 2. You've drunk warm ale, avoided theft, survived stares, and talked to a man who might be either a prophet or dangerously dehydrated. You haven't died. Yet. And still, you're very aware of every eye that's brushed over you. You're not from here. They know. And this place doesn't forget unfamiliar faces. You're hungry. It hits you all at once, sudden and sharp, like a dog that's been watching you from the corner decides to bite. Your last meal was hours ago. Cheese, maybe, or a chunk of bread that had seen better centuries. And now, with ale softening the edge of your anxiety, your stomach lets out a noise that draws a few amused glances from nearby patrons. You try to look casual, like someone whose insides didn't just demand food at a volume usually reserved for dying cows. You scan the room again and zero in on the stew pot over by the hearth. It's still bubbling like a suspicious experiment, a blackened iron cauldron half sunk into the embers. The cook, who looks like he was born from soot and spite, stands guard with a long-handled spoon he uses to both stir and threaten. He's got a bandaged hand, an apron soaked with a pattern of stains you choose not to interpret, and a gaze that could sour milk. The line for food isn't long, just a few people shifting on their heels, cups in hand, bowls tucked under their arms like personal treasures. You don't have a bowl or a spoon. You're not even sure if you're supposed to. There's no posted menu, no barked orders, just the slow churn of stew and the occasional clink of coin passed discreetly into the cook's palm. You rise from the bench, your knees protesting the movement. The floor squelches underfoot, yes, still, and you make your way toward the hearth with that casual, nothing-to-see-here walk of someone trying not to be noticed while also desperately hoping someone notices and explains the rules. When it's your turn, you offer a few coins, small ones, humble but honest. The cook eyes them, then eyes you, then shrugs and ladles a thick beige-brown mass into a chipped wooden bowl he yanks from a shelf behind him. It's hot, at least. Steam rises, carrying the scent of overcooked cabbage, boiled bones, and something vaguely metallic. You can't tell if that's from the ingredients or the pot. He hands you a wooden spoon that's more splinter than utensil and grunts something that might be enjoy or possibly die. You thank him anyway and step aside, careful not to burn your fingers on the bowl. You return to your seat, weaving through elbows and belches, and lower yourself onto the bench once more. Robart has fallen back asleep, mouth open, wheezing softly, the image of a man who's been asleep in more places than you've been awake. You nudge your mug out of the way and set the bowl down, peering into the depths. The stew is ambitious. Chunks of root vegetables float alongside what might be shreds of onion, or possibly just translucent despair. There's meat in there too. At least there are pieces of something with fibres. Could be mutton, could be pigeon, could be rat if the tavern is having a creative week. You take a cautious spoonful. It's salty. Very salty, but not entirely inedible. The heat helps. And the bread, when you find half a piece hidden at the bottom, is only partially stale. Small victories. Historically, tavern fare wasn't exactly haute cuisine. Most of what you'd find in a medieval tavern was whatever was cheap, preserved, or close to going bad. Stews were the norm. Easy to stretch, easy to disguise questionable ingredients, and capable of simmering all day without much attention. Meat was rare unless you were in a wealthier area, and even then, it was often from animals that had failed to impress elsewhere. Stringy old chickens, mysterious wild game, or when desperate, bits from animals that should not be bits anymore. A fun, if mildly disturbing historical quirk. Pottage was the stew of the common folk, often cooked continuously for days or even weeks. As ingredients were added, leftovers stayed behind. The pot was never emptied, just topped off. Generations of stew flavour, layering over time like geological sediment but with more gristle. You take another bite. This stew probably has at least a week of history in it. It's oddly comforting, in a vaguely masochistic way. As you eat, you become aware of the eyes again. Not hostile, just curious. People watching the new person eat the stew is a tradition, apparently a rite of passage. You don't choke, you don't cry, you win some respect. A few moments later, a man across the room makes a loud announcement about the king's taxes, and how he plans to marry a goose if things don't improve. This, somehow, is met with applause. Someone else slaps the table and declares that the stew has too much personality tonight. You smile into your bowl. You're starting to get the humour here. Dark, dry, and just on the edge of hostile. There's something strangely communal about everyone pretending the food's decent while also openly mocking it. It's a game. You're in on it now. Then of course comes the scholarly debate no one asked for. Some experts argue that tavern food was better than we give it credit for. That given the freshness of local produce, lack of processed goods, and communal cooking traditions, the meals were rustic but wholesome. Others call nonsense, pointing to records of spoiled grains, fly-infested meats, and cooks punished for watering down the ale with ditch runoff. It's probably both. The quality depended on the town, the tavern, the season, and how recently someone died in the kitchen. You take another bite of the stew and hit something chewy. You pause, chew slowly. Decide not to ask questions. Just chase it down with a swig of warm ale and press forward. The young man with twitchy eyes leans over now, watching you eat. You'll get used to it, he says. You nod. How long does that take? He grins. Let you know when it happens. You finish most of the stew, against all odds. The last few bites are tougher, literally, but you scrape the bottom of the bowl like it owes you money. Hunger is the best seasoning. You push the bowl aside and sit back, full in that heavy, slightly regretful way. Not satisfied, but no longer starving. The barmaid passes by and, with the grace of someone who's walked this exact path 10,000 times, collects your bowl without stopping. She barely glances at you. That too is a kind of progress. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve, because napkins are a distant fantasy, and sigh. You've eaten, you've drunk, you've survived several unwanted conversations. You're still not entirely sure you won't be robbed before sunrise, but your stomach is no longer cursing your ancestors. It's not a feast, it's not even good, but it's real, and tonight that's enough. The stew is settling, or attempting to, and you're locked in that dangerous middle zone between pleasantly full and dangerously drowsy. The heat of the hearth licks lazily at your boots, your belly's warmed by the questionable contents of your bowl, and the ale, weak though it is, starts humming a lullaby through your bloodstream. You blink slow. The tavern doesn't. It's still alive, still shifting, still watching you watch it. You glance around. Most of the same faces linger. Some slouch deeper, some brighter-eyed now that the ale's making the rounds. The barmaid has replaced her tray with a jug and is moving from table to table like a queen surveying her kingdom, pouring refills and deflecting advances with such elegance it's almost art. Someone near the fire breaks into a laugh that turns into a cough, that turns into a belch. A chicken, yes, an actual live chicken, flutters under one of the side tables, pecking at crumbs and scolding everyone like it owns the place, which, judging by how no one's trying to chase it out, it just might. Then your eyes settle on a pair of men seated across the room, and it's their teeth, or lack thereof, that draws your attention first. The one on the left is built like a brick wall, with a beard that might have things living in it. He grins wide, revealing a set of teeth that resemble the crumbling stones of a forgotten castle. A few are intact, most are gone. The ones that remain lean in different directions like they're disagreeing on something. The other man has done away with the drama entirely. His smile is just gums and enthusiasm, and he uses that smile like a weapon. They're talking animatedly with a third man you hadn't noticed before. Wiry, sharp-nosed, eyes darting like a nervous ferret. You can't hear the full conversation, but it involves exaggerated gestures, much pointing at someone's boot, and what sounds like the phrase divine pig prophecy. You look away. Dental hygiene in the Middle Ages? Let's just say it wasn't top tier. Contrary to popular myth, people didn't never clean their teeth. They used twigs, rough cloth, or rinses made of vinegar or wine, but they lacked toothpaste, floss, and the ability to afford not rotting. Diets heavy on bread and grain didn't help. And dentists? Not really a thing. Toothaches were handled by local barbers, who doubled as surgeons and tripled as people who should absolutely not be performing either role. Tooth extractions were common, crude, and usually done with a smile and a prayer. The smile, of course, came after the patient passed out. Still, in the tavern, no one seems particularly self-conscious. Missing teeth are common, expected, a badge of age, or combat, or one really aggressive hazelnut. You spot a woman laughing at something her friend says and flashing a grin so gap-toothed it's practically Morse code. She looks radiant and drunk. The cultural attitude toward teeth back then wasn't about straightness or whiteness, it was utility. Could you chew? Could you yell insults? Could you hold a dagger between your teeth while climbing a siege ladder? Excellent, you're good to go. The man with the comb-over beside you, grain price guy, leans toward you again. "You looking at Gareth?" he says, nodding toward Gumsmile. "That man once bit a chicken to death." You pause, unsure how to respond. "Why?" He shrugs. "Said it insulted his sister. Could have just been drunk." "Was it cooked?" Another shrug. "Hope not. Otherwise that's worse." You nod, both disturbed and impressed. Gareth, meanwhile, has launched into a story now involving a bear, a cellar, and what sounds like a very unfortunate wheel of cheese. The table around him roars with laughter. There's debate among historians about just how bad medieval dental health really was. Skeletal remains suggest plenty of tooth decay, especially in later centuries when sugar imports began trickling in. But earlier on, when diets were simpler and less processed, some folks kept surprisingly decent chompers. That said, the combination of poor hygiene, crude tools, and general dietary wear and tear meant most adults over 30 had at least a few gaps, especially if they'd ever been in a brawl or lost a tooth to a mug in the face, which, judging by this room, was not an uncommon fate. Across the room, someone slams a tankard onto the floor. Not in anger, just exuberance. The wooden mug bounces and rolls, narrowly avoiding the chicken, which responds with a squawk of indignation. No one apologizes. No one even looks. The floor accepts its new burden. A new face walks through the door, letting in a brief gust of night air and the unmistakable scent of wet leaves. He's cloaked, hood up, and instantly greeted by a few nods and waves regular. He heads straight for the bar, bypassing all the full tables and conversations, and leans in close to the innkeeper. They speak in hushed tones. You catch a word. Shipment. Then another. Bridge. Then the innkeeper hands him something in a wrapped cloth. You're not the only one watching. The sharp-eyed woman by the stairs lifts her head slightly, her gaze tracking the exchange. The man in the corner with the long coat pauses mid-drink. A few others shift. This is the real currency here. Not coin, but secrets, information, smuggled goods, debts, rumours. The tavern isn't just a place to eat and drink, it's an artery. And right now, something just passed through it. You sink a little lower in your seat. Robart stirs again beside you, snorts, and murmurs, "Too many teeth in this place. Makes me nervous." You glance over. He's not even awake. Quirky side note, there are recorded instances, albeit rare, of medieval taverns hosting impromptu dental contests. This usually involved who could bite through the toughest crust of bread, or occasionally who could whistle best through missing teeth. The winner? Usually whoever stayed conscious longest. Someone starts humming nearby, a slow, low tune that might be the beginning of a song, or just someone forgetting they're not alone. It spreads, picked up by a man near the fire, then by a woman balancing 3 mugs on her head. It's not melodic, it's not good, but it's something, a unity. The kind of sound that says, "We survived another day, barely." You let your gaze drift once more. You've started to notice patterns now, the groups that stay close, the regulars who stake out their usual corners, the glances between certain tables' alliances, friendships, rivalries, the way some people drink with their backs to the wall and others never stop watching the door. And in the middle of it all, the toothless, half-toothless and proudly gummed laugh like kings. Not because they've had easy lives, but because they've learned not to take things too seriously, especially things like molars. You raise your mug for another sip. Still warm, still terrible, but somehow in this stew of smells and stares and half-told stories, it's starting to taste a little better. You didn't come in planning to gamble. That was never on your list. Eat something hot, avoid eye contact, try not to get stabbed. That was more your speed. But now you're watching a group huddled around a battered old barrel being used as a makeshift table, and your curiosity has officially wandered into dangerous territory. They're playing dice. The game's rules are shouted more than explained, which somehow makes it feel more legitimate. You hear slurred voices toss around terms like drop the bones and devil's 3, and your ears perk up when someone wins a small pile of coins and shouts with the joy of a man who's just delayed starvation by another day. You slide your mug away. Your stomach's settled now, and you've been here long enough to get a feel for the room's rhythm. That corner's loud with drunks, that table is suspiciously quiet. The fire is still crackling, but most of the heat has drifted into the ceiling beams, and over here at the dice game the energy is magnetic. You rise from your seat slowly. Robart doesn't even stir. He's deep into a sleep that looks both comfortable and potentially fatal. You walk over, threading through the crowd. The players take notice as you approach. Not quite hostile, but alert. One of them, a young man with a crooked nose and a bandage wrapped tight around his left hand, holds up the dice and gestures toward the open side of the barrel. "New blood?" he asks. You nod once, he grins. "Then it's your lucky night. Sit." You don't sit. There's nowhere to. But you step up to the edge and watch. The dice are bone white and worn, the numbers etched deep from years of use, or perhaps abuse. You recognize one die immediately for what it is. The knuckle of an animal, likely a sheep. Maybe a goat. You're not reassured. They're playing hazard, or something very much like it. You've heard of it before, passed around by travellers and soldiers. You pick a number, your main. Roll it, and you win-roll a different number, and depending on the rules you might lose everything, or get another shot. The rest is betting, bluffing, and luck, mostly luck, or skill at cheating, which, judging by how these guys watch each other's hands more than the dice, is probably just as useful. A man throws. The dice clatter loudly against the barrel, bouncing once, twice, and then settling on 2 3s. A groan goes up from the small circle. One man throws his hands in the air. Another spits directly onto the floor and mutters something about cursed hands. The pot, if you can call a pile of filthy coins a pot, moves slightly to the left. They gesture to you. You realise it's your turn. You fish in your pouch, fingers brushing the last few coins you brought with you. Just enough for another night's shelter, and maybe a ride out of here, if things go south. You pause. A raspy voice from your right says, "First roll's free." You glance over and see a woman with weather-worn skin, a single braid, and eyes like winter rain. She nods at the dice, then at the man next to her, who shrugs and pushes them toward you. Fine, 1 roll, no stakes, you can do that. You reach for the dice. They're warm from being held and smoother than you expect. You cup them in your hand and give a small shake, then let them fly onto the barrel. They bounce, rattle, and stop. 6 and 5, the crowd murmurs. Someone curses softly. The crooked-nosed man grins. 11. Look at that. Beginner's luck. You smile. Just barely. It's not about winning anything. Not yet. It's about earning a sliver of respect, showing you're not afraid to try your luck in the den of liars and bones. You step back slightly as the next man rolls, and now you're watching from inside the circle. Part of it. Historically, dice games were wildly popular in medieval Europe, especially among the lower classes. They were easy to set up, easy to learn, and easy to rig. It wasn't just about fun, it was about distraction. A way to forget the cold, the hunger, the endless demands of lords and labour. Of course, the church hated it. Gambling was a sin, obviously. Unless you were a bishop with a taste for high-stakes chess and side bets on the archery tournament. Then, apparently it was culture. Some towns even banned dice games outright, especially in taverns. Authorities believed they encouraged crime, fighting, and moral decay. And in fairness, they weren't wrong. A few bad rolls and a man might lose his week's wages, his boots, or his patience. Fights over rigged dice were so common that some taverns had iron-banded clubs behind the bar just for separating sore losers from their teeth. Quirky side note. In certain parts of France, taverns required dice players to remove their cloaks and hats before sitting at the table, so no one could accuse anyone of hiding extra dice or daggers. It didn't stop the cheating, but it made for more stylish violence. Back at the barrel, things are heating up. The pot has grown, a small mountain of copper and tarnished silver. No one's smiling now. Every eye is locked on the dice as they tumble. The woman with the braid throws and lands a hard 8. Cheers erupt. She scoops her winnings with the confidence of someone who knows how to disappear if needed. Now the bandaged man gestures at you again. Fancy another? You glance at your pouch. You've got enough to risk 1 coin, maybe 2. It's stupid. It's reckless. It's exactly what this place is built for. You step forward, drop a coin on the barrel and nod. 1 roll. The others go quiet. The dice are passed to you. This time they're heavier. You swear the bone is thicker, like these are the special ones. You shake them in your hand, release them with a flick of your wrist, and watch them bounce. A 6 and a 1. Someone whistles. 7. Lucky for some. The crooked-nosed man grins wide. Could be worse. Could be 3. That's the devil's roll. You retrieve your coin, doubled now. Small win. Just enough to make you feel like fate might be on your side. But that's the trap. That's the exact flavour of confidence that gets people sleeping in ditches. You nod, step back again, and watch the next man roll with shaking hands. Somewhere in the background the hearth flares and the firelight flashes off steel. You catch a glint. A dagger maybe, tucked into someone's boot. The woman with the braid notices too. Her smile fades. This game isn't just about dice. It never is. It starts with shouting, because of course it does. Not the angry kind yet, just the overly loud, ale-warmed bluster of men trying to outdo one another. You've returned to your bench, coin pouch intact, a whole 2 copper richer, and heart still hammering from the rush of the dice game. It should be calming down now. You should be able to sink into the background again, let the sounds of the tavern carry you back into the cosy haze of other people's problems, but that's not how this place works. There's no neutral gear. It's all forward motion, sometimes straight into a ditch. The first voice you hear, sharp and nasal, is accusing someone of cheating. The second voice, deeper and less patient, responds by flipping a stool. Every head in the tavern lifts a little. Even Robart from his slumped heap next to you opens one bleary eye. The dice game has dissolved into something less polite. 2 men, both heavy-set, both red-faced, are squaring up. One points an unsteady finger at the other and slurs, "You counted the rolls, you bastard." The accused just grins, arms out, palms up in the universal "who me" gesture. "You rolled the bones, friend." I didn't whisper in their ear. Someone laughs. "Bad idea." The accuser swings. A wild, overcommitted punch that sails past its target and hits a third man square in the back of the head. That man turns, sees blood on his hand, and punches the closest person to him. That person naturally punches back. And just like that, the tavern erupts. Chairs scrape. Tankards clatter. A man roars something unintelligible and leaps onto a table like it's a warhorse. Someone else hurls a half-eaten loaf of bread across the room, which smacks into a woman's headscarf. She responds by dumping a mug of ale over his head. The chicken under the table flaps out with a squawk of righteous fury, wings outstretched like it's staging a coup. You stay seated for about 3 seconds longer than wisdom allows, then slide under the table just as a tankard smashes against the wall behind you. Robart is still sitting there, perfectly still, as if trying to outlast a storm by pretending to be furniture. "Should we move?" you ask from under the bench. He blinks once. "Only if they hit the dog. If they hit the dog, it's serious." You're not sure what dog he's referring to. You haven't seen one. But you take his word for it and stay low. Historically, medieval taverns were magnets for conflict. Alcohol, close quarters, poverty, and too many men with too much frustration made for a volatile mix. Fights weren't just common, they were expected. Some taverns even had designated fight corners, unofficial spaces where arguments could be settled without overturning someone's soup. The barkeepers rarely got involved unless a weapon was drawn or too much furniture got broken. People didn't call the guards. The tavern was the law, at least until things spilled outside. The church hated this, naturally. Not just the violence, but the loss of control. Taverns weren't temples, and that made them dangerous. Here, people shouted without fear of retribution. They schemed. They confessed. And most alarmingly, they laughed at the wrong things. The current chaos seems more comedic than fatal, for now. The man who started it all has been tackled into a heap of potatoes near the fireplace. Someone's singing, badly, and someone else is just repeatedly yelling, "He owes me an onion!" as if it's a matter of international law. You peek over the bench. The fight's devolving into that weird medieval middle ground where people are still technically fighting, but it mostly looks like hugging aggressively one man is trying to remove another's shoe while yelling about justice. Another pair are locked in a slow-motion wrestling match that seems to involve a lot of apologising. And then someone stands up on a table and yells, "Witch!" Everything freezes. Every head turns. You do too. It's a scrawny man with wild eyes and half a cloak pointing toward a young woman near the bar. She's just poured a mug of ale and looks baffled. "What?" "You hexed the dice," he shouts. "I saw it." Murmurs ripple through the room. Even the chicken goes still. The accused, a woman in her 20s with streaks of soot on her sleeves and an expression that says she's had enough of everything, crosses her arms. "I hexed your luck, maybe, because you're terrible at dice." Laughter, cautious and low. You exchange a glance with Robart, who mutters, "That's the moment, right there, where things tip over." Historically, the fear of witchcraft in taverns wasn't unheard of. Dice, drinking, and women who didn't shrink from insult were often considered suspicious. Superstition ran thick, especially in dim, smoky rooms where men wanted something to blame for their poor fortune. Women accused of witchcraft over spilled drinks or lucky rolls weren't always taken seriously by authorities, but tavern justice didn't wait for trials, it waited for kindling. You slowly stand, easing back into visibility. A few others do too, ready to either join the fray or stop it from spiralling. The man on the table falters under the weight of attention. He's swaying now, one boot hanging off his foot. She looked at me funny. The barmaid, who's been eerily quiet through all this, steps up behind him and says flatly, "So do the pigs when you visit the yard." The room erupts in laughter, this time unified and warm. The tension breaks. The man on the table topples backward into someone's arms, who unceremoniously drops him onto the floor. The accused woman raises her mug in mock triumph and someone starts clapping. Just like that, the storm passes. You exhale. Your fingers are clenched tight around the edge of the table, and your pulse is still pounding, but you're upright, uninjured, and not accused of sorcery. You'll take it. Quirky side note. Accusations of witchcraft in taverns, while rare, did happen. A woman who healed a drunk with herbs? Suspicious. A man who won 3 dice games in a row? Possibly cursed. There's one record of a man being thrown into a river because his ale never went flat. Clearly unnatural. Back in the room, the fire crackles again. Someone rights a stool. The barmaid starts pouring drinks like nothing happened. The chicken returns to its post beneath the table, judging everyone silently. Robart finally speaks. Not bad for a Thursday. It starts as a hum, soft and clumsy. Just a few notes wobbling through the air like someone trying to remember the melody of a half-forgotten lullaby. At first, no one pays it any mind. The tavern is still recalibrating itself after the witch accusation, smoothing out its feathers like a ruffled cat, pretending it didn't just attack the wall. Robart has gone back to sleep. Of course he has. And someone is using a rag to mop up a puddle that may have once been ale or broth, or something with legs. The hum persists, grows. Then, like dry straw catching fire, it spreads. A travelling minstrel has appeared, materialised really because you swear he wasn't there a moment ago. He's not flamboyant, no brightly coloured feathers or brocade or bells, just a long brown tunic, worn boots, and a lute so battered it looks like it's seen more sword fights than the man holding it. His face is narrow, sly, the kind of face that has never paid for its own drinks, but always ends up the centre of attention anyway. He strums once casually. The strings respond with a slightly sour twang, but he grins like that's part of the charm. And then, without any announcement, he begins to sing. It's a love song. Of course it is. But not the courtly kind with roses and tragic sighs. No, this one's about a shepherd's daughter and a knight who mistook her for a ghost, tried to kiss her, and got kicked directly in the codpiece. The tavern loves it. Laughter erupts in patches, whistles ring out, and someone near the hearth yells, "Sing it again, but with both ghosts." The minstrel obliges, instantly. Same tune, same verses, but now the ghost kicks back. He's good, you have to admit. His voice isn't perfect, but it has character. Rough like gravel and smoke, but with just enough sweetness on the edges to make you believe he's kissed someone under moonlight. You don't know his name, and he hasn't asked for coin yet, but already people are leaning in, mugs half forgotten, eyes a little wider than they were a moment ago. Music in a tavern changes things. It always has. 1 minute you're strangers trying not to stab each other over stew. The next, you're humming the same tune, finishing verses you didn't even know you remembered. It stitches the room together, even if just for a song or two. Suddenly everyone's facing the same direction, and the firelight feels warmer, like it's part of the melody. Historically, minstrels were as common as lice, and often just as hard to shake. Some were trained, court musicians with sponsors and scrolls of respectable tunes. Others were wanderers, picking up songs like lint and spinning them into gold or at least silver. They lived off the road, the room, the free meal. Payment came in the form of applause, copper coins, and sometimes a spare blanket in a storage loft. They weren't always welcome, especially in towns with strict guild rules, but in rural inns like this, a minstrel was a travelling newspaper, gossip source, and entertainment system all in one. The tavern's mood has shifted. Where once there were brawls and curses, now there's tapping feet and softly swaying shoulders. Even the chicken seems calmer, nesting beneath the bench like it's enjoying the harmony Robart snores in key, which is both disturbing and impressive. Quirky detail. Some medieval minstrels carried licenses granted by local lords or guilds to perform in public spaces. These weren't just permits, they were social armour. They allowed them to avoid being branded as vagabonds or arrested for spreading unsanctioned ideas. That said, many performed without such papers, relying on quick feet and quicker tongues when the constables showed up. The minstrel slides into another song without pause, this one slower, softer. A ballad, maybe. Or a prayer disguised as one. You don't recognise the words. Probably an old dialect, or maybe just half invented. But the melody carries a kind of ache, like homesickness soaked in honey. Around you, the room leans forward. The man beside the fire, the one with the half-bald head and soot-streaked sleeves, wipes at his eye. He does it casually, pretending it's smoke, no one calls him on it. The song tells a story of a ship that sailed west and never returned, of a lover who waited by a tower, of a promise made under a blood moon. It's a good story, maybe even true, or true enough. You wonder if the minstrel has sung this song before in other taverns in other towns, if he sings it differently depending on who's listening, if tonight's version is softer because someone in this room needs it that way. You wonder too what the tavern sounds like without him, if it reverts instantly to shouts and spit, or if the echo of music lingers just long enough to keep people gentle. There's an ongoing academic debate about the role of music in public medieval life. Some scholars argue that songs were primarily functional, used to pass down news, commemorate battles, or reinforce moral lessons. Others believe they were a way to keep despair at bay, to elevate a hard life into something just a little more poetic. Maybe both. Maybe that's the real magic of the minstrel, turning spilled ale and bruised shins into verses worth remembering. As the ballad ends, a hush falls over the room, not total silence, but a breath held collectively, like everyone's afraid to speak first. Then, slowly, someone claps. Another joins. Soon the room applauds, not thunderous, but sincere. The minstrel bows with exaggerated flair, Sweeping his arm wide enough to knock over a mug, no one minds. And now, of course, he makes his rounds. He starts near the hearth, loot slung over his shoulder, moving through the crowd with practiced ease. He doesn't beg, he doesn't ask, he just passes by, letting his presence remind people that joy costs something. Most drop a coin into the pouch tied at his hip. Some whisper a request. One woman presses a kiss to his cheek and tucks a flower into his belt. It might be decorative, might be medicinal, might be poisonous. He doesn't seem to care. He reaches your table and gives you a nod. Like the ghost song? You nod. Especially the codpiece part. He grins. True story? Mostly. You drop a small coin into his pouch. He taps the edge of your mug with a finger, then moves on. And just like that, the music fades. But its spell lingers. The tavern feels lighter. Not clean. Not safe. But softened. As if the walls remembered they were once part of something gentler. You lean back on the bench, ale in hand, and take a slow sip. Tonight you think you'll remember the music. Long after the stew, the shouting, even the fear, you'll remember the song. You're still cradling your mug, letting the last echoes of the minstrel's song float through the warm haze in your head, when your gaze drifts toward the bar. Not the showy part where the ale's poured and barked for, but behind it, past the flickering candlelight, past the shelves with their dusty jugs and stained mugs, into the shadows. It's dim back there, intentionally so. The kind of dim that isn't just from poor lighting, but design. Shadows pile like secrets, and behind the bar there are plenty. The barkeep is back there now, pretending to scrub something with a rag that's clearly doing more harm than good. He's a wide man with hands like tree roots, and eyes that have seen too much and regret none of it. His beard is thick, going to grey in a way that suggests experience rather than age, and he moves like someone who knows the exact weight of every object in the room, including you. He glances your way once, just once, and then returns to his fake cleaning. Curious, you think? Not because you've been singled out, plenty of newcomers tonight. It's that the glance didn't feel like curiosity, it felt like inventory. You take a moment, pretending to watch the fire and scan the bar again. There's a low door behind the counter, just barely cracked, revealing darkness and something that looks suspiciously like crates. A few glass bottles rest just inside, their shapes too elegant for this place. One glows faintly green. You don't think it's the lighting. The woman with the braid, the dice player, leans against the bar now, her back to the counter, but her body turned just enough to keep an eye on that open door. She's not drinking. Not smiling. Just waiting. You've read about this. You've heard stories. A good tavern has a cellar, a great tavern has a hidden cellar, and a legendary tavern has things below that don't show up on menus or tax ledgers. Smuggled goods, bottles of something brewed off map, letters tucked between casks, secrets so old they've fermented. Historically, many taverns doubled as informal marketplaces for less than legal dealings. Ale was the cover, so was food. But behind the barrels and beneath the floorboards, that's where the economy of trust and risk thrived. You could buy things down there. Herbs, black market steel, stolen letters, relics that were probably just bones from a goat, but sold as holy with a wink. You could sell things too, or yourself, in more desperate hours. A scholar once proposed that medieval taverns were early intelligence networks. It wasn't just soldiers and thieves and merchants drinking together, it was information passing hand to hand over spilled mugs and whispered bets. You can't confirm that here, but you can confirm that whatever's behind that bar isn't just storage. Someone passes in front of you, jostling your arm, and you snap out of your thoughts. The barmaid approaches now, tray balanced on one hip, her eyes flicking between tables like a hawk. She's sweaty, sharp, and clearly tired, but she still moves with the kind of grace that only comes from either dancing or dodging drunk since childhood. She slows near your table, not stopping, just hovering. Need anything else? She asks, but it's a test. You know it is. Her tone is too light, too careful. You shake your head, then lower your voice. What's in the back? She blinks once, not surprised, just calculating. Then she smiles. Just where we keep the good stuff. But you raise an eyebrow. How good? Her grin widens. Depends how bad your day's been. And then she's off again, vanishing into the thrum of voices and stomping boots. Quirky fact. Some taverns kept separate kegs for different customers, not just in strength, but in legality. There's documentation of certain brews only served after dark to people with the right password or coin. Some believed these deep ales had herbs that stirred visions. Others claimed they were cursed. One chronicler mentions a drink so potent it made a monk swear at a statue and then kiss it. You glance back at the bar. The door is closed now. The woman with the braid has vanished. The barkeep is still cleaning. It doesn't take much imagination to picture what's behind that door. A low stairwell, a stone floor, a cask tucked in the corner, not full of wine, but of scrolls, maybe weapons, maybe lies. Part of you wants to ask. The rest of you, the part that still wants to wake up tomorrow with all your fingers, knows better. The bar is a performance. Out here it's all mugs and banter. But back there, that's where the real tavern lives. You sip your drink slowly, thinking, and notice how many others glance at that door when they think no one's watching. A man across the room, with a faded tattoo on his neck and a limp that's clearly not recent, eyes the bar, then shifts his chair slightly, as if waiting for something. A second man, seated beside him, slides a folded piece of parchment across the table. It disappears into a cloak pocket before you can blink. You don't mention it. You don't need to. There's an unspoken agreement in here. We don't ask. We observe. We survive. It's almost peaceful in its way. You glance at the barkeep again. He catches your eye this time, doesn't smile, just nods. A slow, almost imperceptible movement. It says, "You're paying attention." That's dangerous, but it's also useful. And just like that, you realise something. You're not just visiting this tavern anymore. You're part of it now. You've barely had time to process the weight of that glance from the barkeep when the door swings open again. And this time, it's not just another farmer trailing mud and desperation. No, this arrival has flair. The kind that walks in like it owns not just the room, but the very concept of walking through doors. He's tall, unnaturally so, with a gleaming belt buckle the size of a dinner plate and shoulders squared like a chess piece. His cloak, navy with gold trim, is clearly tailored, something no one else in this place could afford unless they stole it off a noble's corpse. On his hip is a sword so polished you could use it to check your teeth, assuming you still had any. His boots shine. In this place, in this muddy, ashen ale-soaked tavern. That's not just fashion, that's a threat. A few heads turn, but not in awe, in suspicion. You can feel it. A collective pause, like the whole room took a breath and decided not to exhale until they'd figured this guy out. The barkeep doesn't move. The barmaid glances over her shoulder but keeps pouring. The man takes a few heavy steps in, his heels striking the stone floor like hammers on a forge. Then, because clearly this story wasn't dramatic enough, he speaks. "Wine," he says. Just that. One word, sharp, entitled. The kind of voice used to obedience and echoing halls. Someone near the hearth laughs, not kindly. The man turns, slow and deliberate, scanning the room like he's selecting his next target at a tournament. His eyes land on you for a second cold, calculating and entirely unimpressed. Then he moves on. He doesn't sit. Not yet. Instead, he moves to the bar and places a gloved hand flat on the counter. The barkeep finally reacts, not with words, but by producing a small clay flask from beneath the bar. No label, no flourish. He sets it down, steps back. There's a pause as the man inspects it like he's checking for poison, which to be fair is a reasonable habit in this place, and then he pours it into a tin goblet and drinks. You expect him to grimace. He doesn't. That's how you know he's not new to this kind of place. He drinks like he's sipping from a goblet of red silk at a lord's feast, except he's standing in a room where the stew hisses if left unattended. Robart rouses beside you, lifting his head like a prairie dog catching a scent. "Oh no," he mutters. "That one's trouble. You can smell it." "You know him?" "Nope. That's why I'm worried." And now, finally, the man moves. He chooses a table near the centre, occupied by a trio of labourers who clearly don't want to move. He doesn't ask. He just stands there until one of them gets up, muttering about going outside for air, followed by the other two, less brave, more observant. The man sits slowly, like he's taking command of a throne instead of a rickety stool. There's something unnatural about how clean he is. That much polish in a place this lived in makes him look like he was cut out of a painting and pasted into reality. And the sword, that's the loudest part of him, even in silence, not because he draws it, he doesn't, but because everyone's watching it. The polished hilt, the intricate crossguard, the way his cloak pulls just slightly away to let the scabbard show. A knight? Maybe. Or a lord's errand boy. Or someone who used to be official but got tired of the rules and now plays at rogue. These taverns attract that type people who live on the edge of power, drunk on proximity to importance but no longer safe in the halls of nobility. Historically, knights in taverns were walking complications. Sure, some were noble, generous, poetic souls straight from ballads. But most, mercenaries in fancy coats, unemployed swords for hire, men used to violence being solved with coin or titles, and if they walked into a place like this, it was rarely for the food. A long-standing academic debate centres on whether taverns served as neutral ground between classes, or whether that's a romantic rewrite. Some records suggest knights used taverns to recruit, to intimidate, or to escape court gossip. Others suggest they were just bored, and when men like that get bored, someone usually ends up dead. The knight, or whatever he is, sits back now, goblet in hand, scanning the room like a hawk on a perch. Everyone goes back to pretending they're not watching him. The barmaid doesn't approach. She keeps her distance. That's telling. You sip your ale, trying not to look interested, which of course only makes you more interested. Suddenly there's motion behind the bar. The barkeep disappears behind that little door, the one you were eyeing earlier. 2 heartbeats pass, then 3. When he returns, he doesn't have anything in hand, but he glances at the knight's table as he wipes his hands and moves back into place. You don't like it. That's the kind of movement that happens when the pieces start shifting. When someone drops a knife under the table and the person across from them pretends not to notice, because noticing is riskier than waiting. The knight hasn't looked your way again, but you get the sense he's aware of everything. Every gesture, every twitch, every coin passed hand to hand. You wonder for a moment what it's like to walk into a room and know no one will touch you, that every threat is just background noise, that your sword speaks louder than any insult, and your cloak is an announcement of violence barely restrained. Then again, that kind of confidence only lasts until the one day it doesn't. The wrong tavern, the wrong crowd, the wrong whispered insult said just loud enough to be heard. You remember something Robart said earlier, something about too many teeth in the room makes him nervous. Now you understand, because this man has a full set, and they're all biting inward. Quirky aside, in some medieval towns, knights weren't even allowed in certain taverns without removing their swords. Local ordinances required weapons be handed to the innkeeper at the door. Of course, in the places where real trouble brewed, those rules were just politely ignored, or enforced with a club. You glance at the knight again, still seated, still quiet, but now he's watching the door. You don't know who he's waiting for, but you're starting to hope it's not you. There's a certain cold that rolls in with authority. Not weather, though the door's been opening and closing more than usual, but the kind that clings to armour and titles, settles into the corners of a room and makes everyone suddenly very aware of how loud they're being. The knight hasn't moved, not once. He just watches the door like a gargoyle that drinks wine instead of rain. And when the tavern door swings open again, it feels like the final piece clicking into place. This time, it's the town constables, or watchmen, or whatever your corner of the world calls the people tasked with keeping peace and collecting bribes. They don't kick the door in, or come roaring with torches and shackles. They don't need to. The room recognises the authority by smell. Wet leather, stale sweat, steel oil, and that quiet tension that says, we've come to make things complicated. 2 of them. One older, stocky with a limp, and the other younger, tall and narrow with the kind of moustache that implies more power than actual rank. They wear mismatched uniforms, half covered by weathered cloaks. One has a club, the other has a list. They don't say a word as they enter. They don't have to. The tavern shifts around them. Not in fear, well, not entirely, but in annoyance. This place lives on chaos, not order. Rules are for courtrooms. Here, things are settled with glares and broken mugs. They cross the room slowly, like they've done this before and expect it to go badly. The barkeep watches them without a word. So does the knight, though he does that slow, deliberate sip of wine, the kind that says, I am above this. The younger watchman unfolds a piece of parchment, clears his throat and begins to read. Loudly, clearly, like he's hoping to sound important enough to avoid being hit in the head. By the order of Lord Ferrin of Dunvale, he announces, a search is to be conducted of all establishments operating without formal guild certification within the parish district. A groan echoes from the hearth. Someone mutters, "Here we go again." The older watchman elbows his partner and hisses, "Just check the corners and keep your head down." They move toward the back of the tavern, toward the storage area near the bar, away from the main crush of patrons. This isn't their first inspection. It's not even their fifth. It's more ritual than enforcement. The game is simple. Make a show of checking for contraband, make note of how much tax they collect, and avoid being thrown down the stairs. Still, the tension is real. You can feel it ripple through the room like a stone skipping over ale. Several patrons suddenly remember urgent business outside, others freeze entirely. The woman who flirted with you earlier melts into the shadows by the hearth. Even the chicken retreats, though whether in fear or boredom is unclear. And then the knight stands. Just that. No words, no dramatic flourish. He rises to his full height and stares directly at the younger constable, who immediately fumbles the scroll. There's a moment, sharp and fragile, where you half expect someone to shout. Instead, the knight gestures with his goblet very slightly toward the parchment. "You forgot the part about forfeiture," he says, voice low, smooth, and impossibly steady. "All contraband found in such establishments is to be seized by the crown. The room does not like that. Historically, tavern inspections were a form of extortion. Lords used them to remind locals who held the power. Guild licenses, brewing taxes, and moral conduct laws were all excuses to insert noble authority into the daily life of commoners and enforcement. That usually fell to the lowest bidders, the desperate or the ambitious, people who would look the other way for coin or the right kind of threat. The knight has brought attention to the very thing these men were trying to avoid. Now it's official. Now it's public. Now it has to be done properly. The barkeep doesn't move, doesn't blink. The younger constable clears his throat again and stammers, "We were just, conducting a—" The knight lifts one gloved hand, then conduct it, thoroughly. You feel the room tighten. Not physically, no one's drawn weapons, but emotionally. Like a drawn bow with no clear target. The barkeep finally speaks, voice low and deliberate. "You want to see the back?" The older constable answers, eyes flicking to the knight. "Aye, just a glance." The barkeep lifts the counterflap with a grunt and disappears through the back door. The two constables follow. The door swings closed behind them. For a long moment, nothing happens. The tavern holds its breath. Then the knight turns and retakes his seat, slow and smooth. He doesn't even look satisfied, just bored. You're not sure if he did that to help or to watch the place burn. Quirky detail. In some medieval cities, inns and taverns were required by law to keep their back rooms open for inspection at all times. Of course, inspection was often a dance. Taverns would bribe certain officials, hide the real contraband deeper underground, or time their deliveries to avoid patrols. Some even built false walls or movable shelves to create decoy storage rooms. What the law didn't see, the law couldn't tax. Or punish. The barkeep returns a few minutes later alone. He walks to the bar, pours himself a drink and downs it in one motion. His face is unreadable. No one asks what was found. No one needs to. The constables left too quietly for anything important to have been uncovered. Or maybe they took a bribe, or maybe they saw something and wisely chose to pretend they didn't. That's how this place survives. 1,000 small acts of mutual cowardice dressed up as courtesy. The knight resumes his wine. The barkeep resumes his polishing. The tavern slowly exhales, releasing the breath it didn't know it was holding. Robart, eyes barely open, mutters, "Next time they'll send 5. You nod slowly, watching the back door. You don't know what's behind it, but you're beginning to suspect it's more important than any of the ale out front. You look at your mug. Still half full, still terrible, but you're not drinking for the taste anymore. You're drinking for the quiet, and right now, that's worth every coin. You don't notice her at first, not in any obvious way. She doesn't kick in the door, doesn't shout an order, doesn't leap onto a table and start dancing. She's just suddenly there. One moment you're watching the fire spitting against the hearthstone, half listening to the slow return of tavern laughter after the constable's exit, and the next, there's a woman standing a few feet from your table, staring at you like she's trying to decide if you're edible, annoying, or both. She's not what you expected. Not young, but not old either. Hair in a braid, same as the dice woman from earlier, but dyed a reddish hue that definitely didn't come from nature. Her bodice is worn but well fitted. Her boots look like they've stomped across a lot of bad decisions, and her smile, when it comes, is all teeth and no warmth. "Well," she says, voice smoky and low, "you've got a face like someone who needs a distraction." It takes you a beat too long to respond, mostly because you're not sure if she's flirting, threatening, or offering to sell you a stolen cow. In this place, those lines blur fast. You manage a small, possibly. She slides onto the bench across from you like she owns it. Like she owns you, really. The air around her smells faintly of smoke, lavender, and something fermented that may or may not be intentional. She rests her chin on one hand, eyes scanning your face. "I saw you at the dice table," she says. "Not bad. Lucky." "Thanks," you say cautiously. "I didn't lose a finger, so I'm calling it a win." She laughs, a real laugh, short and sharp. "You're not local. You smell too clean." You glance at your sleeve, still crusted with ale and stew. That's worrying. "I didn't say you smelled good. Just less awful than the rest of them." You resist the urge to sniff yourself. This is one of those moments you've heard about in stories. Lonely travellers in smoky taverns, a mysterious woman appearing out of nowhere, conversation that turns to temptation. It feels like a test, and you get the distinct impression that you'll fail it if you try too hard. She leans in, voice lower. "Name's Brisa. Short for something longer, but that's none of your business." You nod, resisting the urge to introduce yourself. Names in here are currency, and you're not sure she won't spend yours on something illegal. Brisa reaches across the table and lifts your mug without asking. She sniffs it, then takes a sip. "Gods, this is terrible," she says, grimacing. "You need something better." You shrug. "Better comes with strings." "Everything does." She says it casually, like someone who's cut a few of those strings herself. In taverns like this, there are always women like Brisa. Not barmaids, not officially. They don't carry trays or pour drinks. They drift. Some are here for the company, some for the coin, some for the secrets. You never really know which kind until it's too late. Historically, taverns were among the few places where gender roles bent, broke, or at least got very confused. Women weren't supposed to loiter in public houses, at least not according to the church, but they did. In large towns and small villages, you'd find women who ran taverns, who worked the kitchens, who entertained guests for coin or curiosity. And just as often, you'd find women like Brisa, who did none of the above, but still managed to be at the centre of every whisper. She taps her fingers on the table, a rhythm that matches the fire's crackle. "You're watching that back room," she says, not to question. You freeze. She grins. "Don't worry. So is everyone else. They just hide it better." "What's behind it?" you ask, because if you're already being read like a book, you might as well turn the page. Brisa shrugs. "Tonight? Probably nothing. Tomorrow? Maybe something worth dying for." You wait for her to elaborate. She doesn't. Quirky fact. Some historical taverns served as brothels. Not openly, of course, but with arrangements as subtle as a wink and a coin left under a mug. Others weren't about sex at all, but information. Women in these spaces often served as messengers, spies, or brokers. It's a fringe detail most textbooks skip. How these invisible women moved through the undercurrent of medieval politics one whispered rumour at a time. Brisa has the look of someone who's delivered more than her share of messages, and probably a few warnings. She twirls a lock of her reddish hair and cocks her head at you. "So, what are you looking for tonight?" You're not sure how to answer. Not honestly. Maybe you came in looking for warmth, food, shelter from the storm outside and the ones inside your head. Maybe you stayed for the music. Maybe it's the stories now, or the sense that this place is a breathing creature and you've wandered straight into its mouth. "Not looking," you say finally. She nods, like that's the right answer. "Smart," she says, "because the moment you start looking for something in here, you'll find it, and it'll ruin you." Then she stands, not abruptly, not dramatically, just rises like a tide going out. "If you want something better than that piss," she says, nodding at your mug, "ask for red root. Not too much. It'll rot your stomach, but it's warm sweet. Makes your dreams louder." You open your mouth to ask what that means, but she's already walking away, straight past the knight, who tracks her movement without turning his head. Their eyes meet for a breathless second, and then she's gone, swallowed by the crowd near the far wall. You sit there for a long moment, the bench still warm from her presence, the air still tingling with something between smoke and suggestion. You look at your mug, still half full, still terrible, but now it tastes a little more like a choice. The tavern changes once the sun goes down. You can feel it, even if you can't see it, like the place exhales something darker after nightfall, something it was holding in all day shadows stretched deeper now, creeping into the corners with a sort of smug entitlement. The fire burns a little lower, its light more ember than flame, and everything seems to shift inward, quieter, not calmer, just denser. The weight of secrets hanging from the rafters like smoke. You glance back toward the bar. The door to the back room is closed again. The barkeep isn't polishing anymore. He's just standing there, hands planted wide on the wood, head bowed slightly like he's listening for something. You almost ask yourself why, but you already know. The cellar is waking up. There are stories, always are, about what happens below places like this after dark. Not just wine casks and pickled vegetables. No, the real cellars, the kind you don't ask about, host a different kind of inventory smugglers, card tables where coin changes hands in silence, meetings conducted with too many knives and too few witnesses, a pot of stew upstairs and a plot of treason beneath your feet. You feel it tonight more than before. Maybe it's because the constables came and left empty-handed. Maybe it's because the night's still here, unmoving, like a chess piece someone forgot to remove after the last game ended in blood. Or maybe it's because Brisa mentioned the red route, whatever that is, and now your head's turning to doors that shouldn't be open. And then, as if summoned by the thought, a man appears beside the bar, speaking low and close to the barkeep. You can't hear the words, but you see the exchange. A small leather pouch passed palm to palm, vanishing faster than thought. No coin clink, no acknowledgement. The barkeep moves toward the rear door, unlocking it with a key you swear wasn't there a second ago. The man follows, disappearing down into the cellar without so much as a glance back. No one reacts, or rather, no one pretends to notice. This is the rhythm here. The upstairs is for show, the downstairs is for stories that never get told twice. You rise, slow and careful. Your boots stick slightly to the floor, still damp from spilled ale and stew drippings, and you weave your way through the benches, avoiding the night's peripheral vision, though you feel it brushing past your shoulder like a sword unsheathed just enough to catch light. Near the bar, the barkeep has returned and the door is shut once more. But now you're close enough to see the iron latch that seals it. Not a simple bolt, but a mechanism, built into the frame like someone expected trouble from below, not above. He eyes you, not cold, not kind, just weighing. Backroom's closed, he says, flat as the floor. I'm not trying to go back there, you say, which is only partially a lie. He stares a moment longer, then turns away. But behind you, someone says, unless you've got something worth trading. You turn. It's the dice woman. Braid wrapped tight, sleeves rolled up, mug in one hand, her gaze sharper than the knife at her belt. I've seen you watching, she says. You want in? You glance around. No one's paying attention, at least not obviously. The night hasn't moved. Robart is passed out in a different position now, like a man who's training to sleep through earthquakes. What's down there, you ask as she shrugs. Depends on the night, sometimes nothing, sometimes someone, occasionally things that'll cost you your sleep. You hesitate, and she sees it. You're not from here, she continues, so you've got two choices. Stay upstairs where it's safe and stupid, or come downstairs and find out why people like me never look scared. Historically, tavern cellars were used for more than just kegs. In some cases, they were meeting halls for local guilds, criminal rings, rebel groups, during uprisings. Taverns served as the underground's nerve centre, literally underground. Messages were passed under mugs, weapons hidden behind barrels, and more than a few revolutions started with whispered oaths made beside wine racks. There's still debate among scholars about how organised these spaces truly were. Some think they were planned, structured, mini-governments under the feet of kings. Others say they were just desperation dens, places where people who had nothing tried to claw their way to something. Maybe they were both. Are you offering me an invitation, you ask her? No, she says, finishing her drink. I'm offering you a warning. And then she walks away, slipping past the knight without a word, disappearing into the murk at the edge of the room. You don't follow her. Not yet. Instead, you return to your bench, your mug, your place near the hearth. The fire's almost gone now, just a red glow and some hissing ash. But you watch it anyway, eyes reflecting back things you don't want to name. Quirky aside, in certain cities, tavern cellars were rumoured to contain escape tunnels, routes out of the city, or into nearby monasteries, or just deeper into the earth. No maps, no signs, just a trapdoor and hope. Most of them are lost now, sealed or buried. But every once in a while a new one's found, and it always has a story waiting. You finish what's left of your ale. It's gone flat, somehow both warmer and more bitter than before. You push the mug aside and rest your hands on the table. The door to the cellar doesn't open again, but your thoughts stay down there. You know you won't sleep tonight. Not until you find out what's waiting below. You don't remember deciding to stand. One moment you're staring into the dying hearth, thinking about nothing, or maybe everything, and the next, your feet are moving slowly, quietly, like they don't want to alert the part of your brain that still has sense. You're not walking with purpose. Not yet. You're just drifting, like a man following smoke in the dark, hoping it leads to a fire and not another dead end. The tavern has thinned out subtly but definitely. A few familiar faces remain. The red-nosed man near the window humming into his mug, the barmaid wiping down a table with a cloth that only makes things worse, and of course, the knight. Still seated, still watching, though now his wine is gone and his fingers tap rhythmically against the table's edge like a man waiting for someone to finish a very long prayer. You pass the dice barrel again. No one's playing now. The coins have been scooped up, the dice pocketed. A small blood stain on the wood suggests someone didn't know when to fold. It's already crusted over. No one's cleaning it. You drift past the bar. The barkeep doesn't look at you this time. That alone makes the hairs on your neck stir. He's looking at the floor instead, as if the real room is underneath this one, and that's when you hear it. A dull thump, then another, regular like footsteps, or maybe something heavier. It's coming from the back, from beneath the floorboards, and though it could be barrels being moved, it sounds more like bodies. Not falling, not struggling, just shifting, like the cellar is rearranging itself. You hover near the bar, pretending to scan the shelves for a drink you won't order. There's a faded sign scrawled in chalk. No tabs, no trouble, no questions. It feels less like a rule, and more like a promise. The barkeep finally speaks, voice low. You want the games? Go to the cellar. You blink. I'm not here for games. He doesn't smile. Then you're in the wrong place. Before you can ask what that means, he reaches below the bar and thunks down a wooden cup filled with something amber. It smells sweeter than ale, but sharper too, like someone bottled the idea of a headache. On the house, he says, for your nerves. You don't touch it, but you nod. Then you move. The door behind the bar is open again, just slightly. Not enough to seem like an invitation, but not closed either. You slip around the bar's edge, heart thudding like a warning drum in your chest. No one stops you. No one even looks, which is somehow worse. You push the door open with one hand and step inside. Darkness, thick, cool, and pressing. The smell is immediate. Earthy, yeasty, damp. Not rot exactly, but close. The scent of things aging, fermenting, hiding. You take a step forward and your boot hits the first stair. Wood, worn smooth in the middle, edges chipped. You descend slowly, one hand trailing the wall, the other hovering near the knife you're not carrying but wish you were. The steps creak, not loudly, just enough to let the dark know you're coming. When your boots finally touch stone, the world changes. The air is cooler here. Still, but not quiet. There's a hum, subtle but steady, like someone tuned the whole cellar to the same note and now it's just holding. The space opens out in front of you. Not wide, not grand, but functional. Rough-hewn beams hold up the low ceiling, some blackened by age, others newer, reinforcing the older wood like bones splintered by experience. Lanterns hang at odd intervals, their glow flickering just enough to keep your eyes from adjusting fully. Shapes move in the shadows. Figures people, not many, half a dozen, maybe more, scattered around wooden crates, barrels and low tables. No one looks up. Everyone's busy, talking in hushed voices, exchanging parcels, rolling dice that don't clatter. You spot Brisa immediately. She's in the far corner, leaned over a table where 3 men are playing a game you don't recognize. She looks up, sees you, then returns to the game without a word, but she gestures with 2 fingers. A small motion, casual. Come in. Stay low. You walk deeper. The cellar isn't built like a proper room, it's a web. Narrow paths between crates and casks, private spaces walled off by barrels stacked high. You pass one man counting dried herbs into a pouch, Another whispering to a woman while holding something wrapped in linen. No one pays you any mind, you're just another shadow now. There's a space near the back that hums louder than the rest. Not with noise, but tension. A small circle of watchers gathered around two men seated on the floor, facing each other with knives, not drawn, just held. Tipped down against the ground like they're waiting for the signal. One of the watchers sees you and raises an eyebrow but says nothing. Brisa appears at your side. You don't know how she moves so fast. I told you not to come down here, she says quietly. You said it was a warning. And you ignored it. I do that, she smiles. You'll fit right in. You nod toward the knife circle. That a game? Sort of. First one to blink loses, sometimes an eye. You stare. She shrugs. No one's died this week. You turn your attention to the rest of the room. It's a marketplace, yes, but not of goods, of leverage. Everything here is a promise, a secret, or a risk. You could buy something, sure, but you'd owe something too. Quirky fact. Medieval gambling wasn't always about money. Some games, especially among the desperate, were played for favours, services, or silence. In some taverns, a single night's sleep could be wagered and lost. There are even whispered accounts of men gambling for memories, forced to forget names, faces, debts. Whether through ale or trauma, no one's quite sure. You ask Brisa, what would someone wager down here? She glances at you, serious now. Depends what you want to forget. You let that sit. Then she nudges your arm. Come on, someone wants to meet you. You don't ask who, you just follow her deeper into the dark. Brisa moves like she's memorized every creak of the cellar. She doesn't walk, she flows, weaving between crates, under low beams, through lantern shadows that barely acknowledge her. You try to match her pace, but the air here feels thicker now, laced with something more than dampness. It's not just the smell of old ale and packed dirt anymore. It's the weight of everything that's been said down here in whispers. Every secret ever traded like coin. Every deal struck over a hand of rigged dice or a knife tip pressed gently into someone's ribs. You follow her into a narrow alcove near the far wall, where two barrels form a makeshift bench, and a table between them is covered in parchment, melted candle wax, and a half-finished game of something with bones and carved stones. There's a man sitting there, barely visible in the flickering light, but you see the glint of metal on his fingers before anything else. Rings, not ornamental, not fancy, just plain, heavy, and worn. The kind of rings that double as weapons in close quarters. He's old but not fragile. Bald on top, beard streaked with grey, but his shoulders still carry tension like they've never relaxed in 30 years. His eyes are the colour of rain about to fall. They land on you with the calm interest of someone who's already guessed your entire life story and is just waiting for you to confirm it. Brisa doesn't speak. She just steps aside, leaving you to fill the silence. You clear your throat. You wanted to see me? The man doesn't answer at first. He picks up one of the bone pieces from the game board, turns it between his fingers, and sets it down again. Then slowly, I saw you lose, then win, then sit still long enough to listen. His voice is quiet, rough, but carries, like a whetstone being dragged across metal. I wasn't trying to be noticed, you say. No one who ends up down here ever is. He leans forward slightly, hands clasped, elbows on his knees. You expect a name, maybe a title. You get neither. Tell me, he says, what do you think this place is? You hesitate because that feels like a trap disguised as small talk. A cellar. Wrong, he replies instantly without malice. The cellar is just the lungs. This, he gestures broadly, is the heart. Brisa speaks now, softly. Upstairs is for drinkers. Down here's for believers. You frown. Believers in what? In anything, the man says. Doesn't matter. Believers always find each other. They come down here looking for proof, for a cure, for someone to make them feel less alone or to disappear. You glance around. A woman in a hood is pressing a sealed envelope into the hands of a man whose cloak smells like rust and fire. In the far corner, a pair of dice players whisper after every roll, never reacting visibly to the outcome. You see a boy, no older than 12, trading dried herbs for a pouch of coin while his guardian pretends not to see. Why me, you ask. He chuckles, dry and soft. That's what everyone asks. The ones worth answering are the ones who don't expect an answer. You open your mouth, but he cuts you off with a raised hand. Don't speak, he says. Listen, because you need to understand what this place really is. He gestures toward the low ceiling, the beams above your head. Above us is chaos. Arguments, spilled ale, songs that never had a tune to begin with, fights over goats and stew and pride. But down here, there's order. Not the clean, polite kind, but old order, the kind that knows blood is a language. You try not to shift in your seat. Historically, many medieval taverns had unofficial lower levels of operation, and while few records survived, some chroniclers hinted at secret guilds, revolutionary gatherings, or networks of underground barter that kept entire communities alive when the lords above turned sour. These spaces weren't built overnight. They evolved, generation by generation, shaped by need and sharpened by danger. Quirky detail. In the 13th century Prague, a tavern was discovered with a false floor in its cellar, beneath which was a room containing nothing but a single chair, a ledger, and hundreds of sealed letters. No explanation, no signature, just secrets left in the dark. The man picks up a scroll from the table and hands it to you. It's sealed with dark red wax, no emblem, just a crude X pressed into the blob. It feels warm in your hand. Too warm. You don't open it here, he says. You nod slowly. Brisa's watching you with that same faintly amused expression she always wears, like she knows how this will end but is still entertained by the middle. Now, the man says, leaning back, comes the part where you decide. Decide what? If you're coming back. You think about it. Upstairs is simpler. Bad food, warm ale, music, fights that blow over, faces you can laugh with or forget. But this place is thick with meaning and danger, and something you don't have a name for yet, but already suspect will change you if you let it. I haven't decided, you admit. He smiles. It's not pleasant. It's not threatening. It's just true. You will. Then he waves you off like a man brushing dust from a sleeve, and just like that, the meeting's over. Brisa walks you out in silence, back through the maze of crates and whispers, back past the lanterns and dice and hidden messages exchanged with nods, back to the stairs. You handled that better than most, she says. Is that a compliment? It's survival advice, she replies. You climb the steps one by one, heart a slow drum in your ears. When you reach the top, the tavern feels different again. Not better, not worse, just changed. You don't fit into it quite the same now. The night's gone. Robart is awake. Barely, muttering to himself about fish with human hands. The barkeep doesn't look up. You find your bench again. You sit. The scroll rests in your pocket like a second heartbeat, and the fire, though low, still burns. You sit back down at your bench like someone who's just returned from a place they shouldn't have survived. You're not shaking, but your bones feel loose, unsteady, as if they've forgotten how to be yours. The cellar wasn't cold, not really, but you shiver anyway. Something about the air down there, the silence beneath the voices, the way that old man spoke like he was digging you a grave and offering you the shovel. And now you've got a sealed scroll tucked in your pocket that's probably worth more than your boots, and possibly your life. You haven't opened it. You're not supposed to. You don't even know if you will. The wax seal is rough against your leg, a subtle scrape every time you shift in your seat. It's not heavy, but it might as well be a millstone. You take a long, slow breath. The tavern has returned to its standard chaos. Drunken laughter, someone trying to balance 3 mugs on their forehead, while singing something about a donkey's wedding, and the unmistakable sound of someone retching into a bucket behind a curtain. Your mug's still there, barely a swallow left in the bottom. The ale has gone completely flat. You drink it anyway. Not for taste, not for courage, just for something to do with your hands. Robart is awake again, mostly. He's picked up a crust of bread from somewhere. It looks stolen, but possibly gifted by a barmaid too exhausted to care. And he's chewing it with the focus of a philosopher deep in contemplation. His eyes are bloodshot, ringed with grime. But there's something alert behind them now. Like maybe he was never truly drunk, just hiding behind the performance. You went downstairs, he says, without looking up. You glance over, not bothering to deny it. He rips off a piece of bread and tosses it to the chicken that has once again claimed dominion under your table. It snaps it up like it's collecting dues. A lot of folks go down there once, Robart continues, not many go twice. You ask, why not? He shrugs. Because once you know it's real, you can't drink in peace anymore. You nod. That tracks. He chews thoughtfully. They offer you something? You don't answer. You don't have to. He sees it in your eyes, the weight, the awareness. You say yes, he asks. I don't know. He chuckles, then coughs. You'll say yes, we all do. Eventually, one way or another. You look around the room. The tavern hasn't changed, not really. Same warped beams, same sour air, same mix of voices that range from sobs to songs. But you've changed. You're seeing the patterns now. The way the barkeep nods slightly at certain patrons and not at others. How the barmaid occasionally leans down to whisper things that aren't orders. The way people pause at the top of the stairs before leaving, as if checking the room to make sure it's still safe to walk out alive. The scroll presses against your side again. Robart finishes his bread, wipes his hands on his cloak and squints into the distance. Once I saw a man bring a map out of there, he says. Said it led to a reliquary in the forest. Swore it was guarded by monks who'd forgotten they were dead. You raise an eyebrow. That true? He shrugs again. Does it matter? That's the thing about places like this. Truth isn't measured in facts, but in consequences. If someone believes the story enough to act on it, then it becomes real. A map, a message, a scroll sealed in wax. It's all tinder. What matters is whether you strike the match. Someone stumbles past your table, muttering to himself, trailed by a woman who seems to be half laughing, half threatening him. She's brandishing a spoon like a weapon, which in this place might actually be one. You glance toward the bar, where the barkeep is talking to a man with a limp and a face like sun-dried meat. They speak in short, clipped phrases, and then the limp man disappears toward the back. The door to the cellar stays closed this time, and historically there were taverns known for their remedies, folk medicines, tinctures, and strange brews said to heal everything from toothache to heartbreak. In some, you could buy sleeping draughts, or quiet tonics, that were definitely less than legal. And then there were the weirder concoctions. Pickled bats, powdered horn, fermented turnip juice boiled with burnt bread. Taverns were less about hospitality, more about alchemy, with a license to poison you slowly. Quirky detail. There are recorded cases of taverns serving medicinal ale steeped with herbs like wormwood or belladonna, mildly hallucinogenic and more than mildly dangerous. Some patrons claimed it gave them visions, others died. One chronicler tells of a man who drank a pint and spent the rest of the night confessing to crimes that hadn't happened yet. You wonder what's in your drink now? You wonder if any of this is real, or if you've been breathing in too much lantern smoke and guilt. Brisa appears again, sliding onto the bench across from you like she never left. You don't jump, just tilt your head, acknowledging her presence with the resignation of someone who knows better than to be surprised anymore. She eyes you for a long moment. You still haven't opened it. No. She reaches forward, taps the edge of your mug. You want to? You meet her gaze. Not here. Good answer. There's a pause. Not awkward, just weighted. She leans in slightly. When you do, don't be alone. You frown. Why not? Because sometimes it's not what's in the message that matters, she says. It's what comes after. Then she stands again, already halfway to vanishing. You call after her. Who are you, really? She stops, smiles. No one ever asks the first time. Then she's gone. You look down at the table. Your mug is empty, your mind is full, and that little scroll in your pocket is still waiting. Still warm. The scroll burns a hole in your pocket for the better part of an hour. You don't move. You don't speak. You just sit there at your bench while the tavern swirls around you in its usual state of grumbling madness, and that tiny, wax-sealed piece of parchment hums like a wasp, trapped beneath your coat. No one's watching you anymore, not that you can tell, but your nerves have gone feral. Every boot scuff, every throat clear, every laugh that stretches a beat too long sounds like it's aimed directly at you. You turn the scroll over in your hand once, just under the table. It's not big. Short and tightly wound, the wax seal hardened into something vaguely thumb-shaped, a deep crimson mark pressed into it. Still no crest, no signature, just the X. That letter has never felt more ominous. It could mean anything. Danger, treasure, a kiss from a mouth you shouldn't trust. But still, you don't break the seal. Not here, not where it might matter too much. Instead, you lean back against the wall, your head tilted, eyes scanning the tavern as it eases into a more comfortable kind of chaos. The hour is late now, not quite midnight, but close enough that the energy has shifted. The early drunks have passed out, heads on tables or curled up in the corners like discarded sacks of grain. A few others still drink, but they're quieter now, mumbling into their mugs like the ale's finally taught them to confess, You hear snatches of story drifting from nearby tables, some new, some recycled, some so old they sound like myths being told for the 1000th time. One man is describing in grotesque detail the smell of the battlefield at dawn. Another swears he saw a man drown in quicksand made entirely of sheep dung. A third recounts how he once lost a bet and had to marry a goose, and the way he tells it, you start to believe he's not entirely joking. You pull your cloak tighter, more to hide the scroll than for warmth. The barkeep doesn't look at you, but you know he knows. Same with the barmaid, who's vanished into the back again. Same with Brisa, wherever she's slipped off to. You get the sense that once someone down there hands you something, everyone upstairs can smell it on you. Someone strikes a match near the hearth trying to coax the flames back to life. The fire flares briefly, throwing the room into high contrast. Faces lit like masks, shadows twisted like monsters against the beams. You don't like what it does to the night's empty seat. Still warm, probably. Still dangerous. No one's claimed it. No one will. You stand up, slowly, like you're afraid the floor will notice. Robart gives you a glance, not curious, just vaguely amused, and then goes back to stirring whatever's floating in his mug. You walk across the room, not quite sure where you're going until you're there. The far corner, beneath a narrow window so dusted over it filters moonlight like flour through cheesecloth. There's an old stool here, barely functional, and a tiny round table that's scarred with knife marks and deep gouges, some in the shape of names you don't recognise. This spot is quieter, removed, a little more yours. You sit, wait, and then, when the moment finally feels steady, you pull the scroll from your pocket. Your thumb hovers over the seal, and here, of course, your mind decides to run through all the worst-case scenarios. Poison in the wax, a summoning spell that tears open the floor beneath you, a message meant for someone else, someone dangerous, who'll know it's missing the moment the seal breaks. You press down anyway. The wax cracks with a tiny snap. The scroll unwinds in your hand. The parchment is brittle but intact, and the ink is fresh enough that it hasn't yet begun to fade. You read the words once, then twice, then a third time, slower, letting each sentence sink like a pebble into deep water. It's not what you expected. There's no code, no map, no call to arms, no instructions for treason or reward for loyalty. It's a story, a short one, just a single page, really. Maybe 2 paragraphs, handwritten in a looping scrawl. It tells the tale of a plague ship that washed ashore in a place called Belmere, long ago, when the seas were dark and the birds refused to fly inland. The crew, it says, was already dead, except one. A boy, no more than 12. He carried no fever, no sores, no madness in the eyes, just silence and a scroll, like yours. He handed it to the village elder, and within the hour every bell in town rang, once, then silence. 3 days later, the village was gone, empty. Not burned, not slaughtered, just gone. The scroll ends with a question scrawled at the bottom in darker ink. When the bell rings for you, will you answer? That's it. You stare at the parchment for a long time, unsure what to feel. Is it a warning? A riddle? A curse? You flip the scroll over, looking for more nothing. You hold it up to the candlelight. No invisible ink. No sigils or watermarks or instructions. Just a story. And a question. A tavern tale, maybe. A ghost story dressed up as a message. Or maybe it's the kind of thing the people downstairs use to see what kind of person you really are. Do you laugh? Do you run? Do you ask for more? Historically, plague stories travelled faster than the diseases themselves. They weren't just cautionary, they were currency. A way to explain the inexplicable villages vanishing without a trace. Towns suddenly silent. Not always death. Sometimes something else. Some scholars claim these tales were used to identify marked places, settlements near old magic, buried relics, or cursed ground. Places the crown wanted forgotten. Places someone had to erase. Quirky aside, one recovered document from a 14th century English abbey tells of a silent visitor who left a scroll and vanished. A week later, the monk stopped writing the last entry. Just the word, ready. You roll the scroll back up, slower now, your fingers trembling just slightly. The seal's broken, and something's changed. You don't know what, but you feel it. Then, the bell rings. Once, high, clear, mournful. The entire tavern freezes. Even the chicken stops moving, and no one speaks. No one finishes their drink, no one breathes. And then, without panic, without a word, people start to stand. Quietly. Not everyone. Just a few. A half dozen. Some you recognize. Some you don't. One of them is Brisa. She meets your gaze across the room and nods once. The message has been delivered. The bell is rung. Now you have to answer. The bell's echo is still clinging to the air like dust when you rise from your seat. You don't remember making the decision exactly. Just the sensation of your legs unfolding, slow and unsteady, as if someone else tugged the strings. The scroll is tucked back in your pocket, heavier now that it's been read. Or maybe you're heavier, like the story inside it leaked into your bones. The tavern hasn't returned to normal. It's not panicking, not frozen. It's in that odd in-between state, the kind you see just before a storm hits, or just after someone's made a very expensive mistake. The fire crackles, but no one talks. No mugs are lifted. No laughter dares to fill the gap the bell left behind. That bell wasn't part of the tavern. There's no belfry here, no visible tower, no rope in the rafters waiting to be pulled. It sounded like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Clear, pure and old in a way that presses against the ribs. You get the sense it wasn't meant to signal alarm. It was meant to summon. Brisa is standing now near the hearth. One hand rests lightly on the back of a chair, but she doesn't need the balance. She looks calm, prepared. Her eyes find yours and she tilts her head. Just a fraction, a silent question. Are you coming? You move toward her slowly, threading between tables, past men who now pretend to be deeply interested in the contents of their boots. Robart is still slouched where you left him, but his eyes are open, tracking you like a sleepy hound. He raises his mug in a sort of salute. Doesn't say a word. You reach Brisa. She doesn't greet you. She simply turns and walks toward the back of the tavern, toward that little side door near the hearth. It's a door you hadn't noticed before. Too narrow, too quiet. One of those doors that seems to always exist in old buildings but never leads anywhere useful. Tonight, though, it's wide open. And behind it, stairs. Not down, up. You follow her. The climb is steep, the wood groaning underfoot with every step. You'd think the upper floor of a tavern would be for rooms. Simple, cheap, probably shared with rodents and someone else's regrets. And maybe, once, it was. But not anymore. At the top of the stairs is a landing dimly lit by a single guttering candle. Brisa pushes open a door at the far end. No key, no lock. Just her palm against the wood, slow and deliberate. The room inside is small, low-ceilinged, and utterly still. 6 others are already here, the ones who stood when the bell rang. Some look like fighters, others like scholars who forgot how to find a library. One man has a scar that splits his cheek in 2 directions. Another wears a red sash across his chest that doesn't seem ceremonial so much as earned. They don't look at you, they don't speak. Brisa steps into the centre of the room and turns to face the group. "It's time," she says, no preamble. One of the men, older, his hair silver and tied back, asks, "Is it confirmed?" Brisa nods. "We got the first bell. The message was delivered." Every face in the room shifts at that. Not in fear, in understanding. Your voice comes out hoarse. "What does it mean?" Brisa glances at you and for a second you think she's going to give you a riddle. Instead she says, "It means the dead are moving again." You blink. "The what?" A woman with a scarred lip adds, "There's a line that's supposed to hold. Always has. Until it doesn't. The bell rings when it breaks." You shake your head. "Is this a joke? A story?" "Everything in that tavern is a story," Brisa says. "Some of them just haven't happened yet." Another voice speaks up from the corner. "We've seen it before. Not in this region. Not for decades. But the pattern's the same." You're trying to process it. Trying to drag some logic into this room like a lifeline. And what do we do about it? Brisa steps closer. We follow the path. The scroll gives us the first clue. The bell means the window's open, but it won't stay open long. You pull the scroll from your pocket again. The wax seal is broken, the parchment slightly creased from your earlier reading. You hand it to her. She doesn't take it. It's yours now. It only opens for the first. That doesn't make you feel better. You look around the room again. These people aren't soldiers. Not all of them, anyway. They don't wear armor. They don't carry banners. But there's something about them. An edge. A readiness. A weight. In the way they stand like they've been waiting for something to happen for a long time. Brissa continues, voice steady. There's a place north of here. Belmare, the one from your scroll. The village that vanished, you ask? She nods. If the bells rung again, then something there is stirring, and if it isn't contained... The silence that follows is louder than anything the tavern ever served. Historically, rural Europe was full of stories about cursed towns, places that vanished overnight, swallowed by plague or war or superstition. Some were later discovered buried under floods or collapsed mines. Others, never found at all, just names on maps that no longer exist. But in the folklore, those towns weren't just lost, they were taken. Some believe the bells used in these legends weren't church bells at all. Some claim they were warning bells, relics from before the organised faiths, meant to signal the shifting of worlds, the thin places. Quirky historical note. A handful of surviving manuscripts refer to answering bells, mystical objects said to summon only those bound by oath or by blood. Some claim they ring only once. Some say they keep ringing until the job is done. Brisa walks to a chest against the wall and opens it. Inside are 6 leather packs, worn, patched, ready for travel. She lifts one and tosses it toward you. You catch it. Barely. You came this far, she says. You don't have to come further, but if you stay here, someone else might carry what you've already seen. You stare at the pack. You think about the cellar, the silence, the bell. You look up at her. How long do we have? She pulls her own cloak tighter. We ride at dawn. You don't sleep. No one in the room does. Even after Brisa blows out the candle and the group settles into corners like old cats in the rafters of a barn, there's no real rest. Just waiting. The kind of stillness that isn't born from peace, but from bracing. Like standing too close to the edge of a high place where sleep isn't rest, it's vulnerability. You lie back against the rough floorboards, the leather pack tucked behind your head, and stare into the shadows on the ceiling, listening. Someone snores softly. Another hums a broken tune under their breath. Outside the warped window pane, the wind shifts, rising just enough to rattle the shutters and whisper across the old roof tiles, like a language forgotten by everyone but ghosts. And below, through floorboards and memory, the tavern murmurs. It doesn't sleep either. You can hear the occasional scrape of chairs, the clink of mugs, boots dragging across worn stone. Even this late, no, especially this late, the tavern lives. There's something comforting in that, something familiar. The way a storm becomes background noise once you realise it's not aimed at you. Eventually morning creeps in. Not a loud arrival, just a softening of the dark, a silver edge sliding in under the doorframe and across the warped planks someone stirs. Then another. Brisa is already up, of course, checking the packs, tightening straps, humming to herself like a woman trying to keep her mind from falling through cracks she's spent years avoiding. You sit up slowly, spine stiff, neck sore, brain doing the kind of sluggish calculation that only happens when adrenaline meets reality, and they decide to arm wrestle. Brisa tosses you a hunk of bread from the pack. It's dense, hard enough to be classified as a blunt weapon, but it tastes slightly of honey, which feels like a small and unexpected kindness. Eat quick, she says, biting into her own. We ride with the sun. The others are quiet as they move. No one talking, but not in a sullen way. It's more like everyone already knows what needs to be done. The scarred woman with the red sash nods at you as she tightens the buckles on her boots. The silver-haired man sharpens a blade the length of your forearm using a stone that looks older than this building. One of the younger ones, a narrow fellow with ink-stained hands and nervous eyes, ties a rolled map to his belt with such care you'd think it was his only possession. You sling the pack over your shoulder. It's heavier than it looks. Inside are things you didn't pack. Rope, a skin of water, a length of cloth you hope you won't need for bandaging, and tucked into a side pocket, another sealed scroll. This one bears the same waxy X, but it's blue this time. You don't open it. You all descend the stairs together. No ceremony, no speech, just boots on wood and the quiet creak of old boards that have carried countless secrets and sins. Downstairs, the tavern is nearly empty. The barmaid is asleep on a bench, her arm flopped over her eyes, apron still dusted in flour and ash. The barkeep leans against the wall, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded but sharp beneath the wear. He doesn't greet you, just nods. One by one, the group steps out into the dawn. You follow them. The cold hits immediately. Not sharp, but biting in that slow, creeping way that makes you grateful for every layer of wool and leather on your body. The air smells of damp earth and horses and distant smoke. The skies are muted grey, not dramatic, not stormy, just expectant. Outside the tavern, there are 6 horses tied to the rail. You don't ask where they came from. One looks like it's seen better centuries. Another looks like it might be smarter than you. The one you're guided toward is sturdy, with a white streak down its nose and a mane that suggests someone once tried to braid it and lost interest halfway through. You mount up with all the grace of someone raised near horses but never on one, and Brisa grins at your awkward shift in the saddle. "Don't fall off," she says. "The dirt out here bites." One by one, the others mount. No one rushes. They move like people who know how to pace their danger. As you ride out, the tavern shrinks behind you. Not literally, of course, but in your mind, it starts to feel like something that only exists in the present. Once it's behind you, it becomes a memory. Still loud, still full of stories, but no longer a place you are, just a place you were. The group moves fast enough to make conversation difficult, which is fine. You're not in the mood. The morning light rises slow and silver across the fields, glinting off puddles from last night's rain, and casting long shadows from frost-covered trees. Birds move in flocks overhead, but they don't sing. That silence makes you uneasy. It's too much like the bell. Brisa rides beside you for a time. She doesn't speak, but eventually she pulls something from her saddlebag and passes it over. A folded piece of parchment. Blank, at first glance. You glance at her. "Another message?" "No," she says. "Just space." You raise an eyebrow. "For writing your own," she clarifies. "There's something in that. An offer, or maybe a warning. Because whatever happens next, you'll either need to tell someone, or leave no trace at all." Historically, it's true. Messengers carried blanks. Scribes on the move, mercenaries and scouts. They recorded not just orders, but events, deaths, discoveries, directions. Sometimes they wrote coded messages. Sometimes they just needed to confess something and didn't trust their own mind to remember it clearly. Quirky detail. One parchment found in a sunken satchel near the River Wye contained nothing but a single line in Latin, repeated over and over. The bell does not toll for the dead, but for the forgetting. No context, no date. Just repetition. Over and over, 13 times. You tuck the parchment into your coat. The trees begin to thin, the land rising gradually toward hills in the distance. You can feel a change now, not just in the air, but in something deeper, like a string being drawn tight through the land itself. Brisa feels it too. Her fingers drum against her saddle, her jaw tightens. "Belmir's 3 days out," she says. "Maybe more if the fog slows us." "What are we expecting?" you ask. Her eyes stay fixed on the horizon. Signs, ruins, maybe answers, maybe something that needs to be buried again. You nod slowly, and for a long while no one says anything. You ride on, carrying secrets in your pocket, a blank page in your coat, and the taste of a bell that still echoes in your bones. By midday, the road starts to vanish. At first, it's just subtle. Cobbles giving way to dirt, ruts growing deeper, the occasional wheel track veering off into the underbrush, like it changed its mind halfway through. But eventually, even the dirt loses conviction. It gives up entirely somewhere past a moss-covered milestone so eroded it could just as easily be a grave marker. From there on, you're not following a path. You're following a hunch. The group doesn't seem concerned. Brisa up front, the silver-haired man close behind, red sash to the rear. They ride with a strange kind of trust, not in the ground beneath them, but in something older, something unseen. They don't look for signs. They feel them. You're not there yet. You're still cataloguing everything, clinging to details. The gnarled trees that lean just a bit too far toward the road, like they're eavesdropping. The way the birds stay silent even now. The pale growths clinging to rocks in clusters. Fungus, maybe, or just moss with performance issues. The smell of the woods, which should be damp and earthy but carries something else underneath. Not decay exactly, more like disuse, like the land has gone dormant. You pass a stone wall, mostly collapsed, with lichen crawling over it like a lazy snake. It encircles nothing, just emptiness. Maybe it was once a field, maybe it marked something forgotten. Now it holds only stillness, and a single rusted horseshoe dangling from a nail. Brisa points as you pass it. "Ward marker," she says. You squint. "Against what?" "Doesn't matter anymore, it's broken." Historically, boundary charms and protective wards were placed at the edges of towns, usually in symbolic forms. A horseshoe, a bundle of straw, a carved face superstition. Sure, but to the people who built them, they were lines drawn not just in the dirt but in reality. Crossing meant leaving behind the known and entering something else. You ride on. The light begins to shift despite the hour. Not darker, just muted. Colours drain slightly from the landscape, like someone's turned the saturation down. Even your cloak looks greyer than it did this morning. It's subtle enough that you second-guess it at first, but the others notice too. The map-bearer tightens his grip on the reins. Red Sash mutters something under his breath that might be a prayer or a curse. Either would be appropriate. The horses grow uneasy. They start to twitch, ears flattening. Yours begins sidestepping for no reason, snorting softly like it smells something it can't see. You stroke its neck gently, whispering nonsense in the tone of someone who's pretending they've done this before. Brisa pulls up ahead. The group stops. There's a clearing just ahead, framed by crooked oaks whose roots look like frozen fingers mid-clutch. In the centre of the clearing stands a well, no rope, no bucket, just a circular stone mouth, partially caved in, choked with dead leaves and thyme. This was the edge, Brisa says. You ask, of what? She glances back. Belmere? No sign, no road, no archway with a name etched above it. Just this, a collapsed well and a memory. You dismount, legs stiff, knees sore, boots sinking slightly into the loamy earth. The others do the same, tying their horses loosely to trees they hope won't wander off. The group fans out, no orders, no commands. They just know what to do. The map-bearer begins pacing out a perimeter. Red Sash draws a small blade and scratches a rune into a nearby tree. The silver-haired man lights a candle, cups it in his palms, and mutters something that makes the flame flicker unnaturally. You walk to the well, peer inside. It's deeper than it looks. A ragged vertical tunnel that disappears into shadow too thick for daylight to reach. You drop a pebble in, count. Nothing. No echo, no splash, just silence. Brisa joins you at the edge. Used to be clean water here, she says, before it dried up. Why didn't they just dig another? She glances at you, expression unreadable. You don't dig again when the first one goes bad. You move. You feel the weight of her words, and not just in the air. It's in the trees, in the hush of the forest, in the way even the wind avoids this place. Belmere isn't a ruin. It's a wound, and it hasn't healed. The group regathers near the edge of the clearing. Brisa takes out her pack, pulls a second scroll, this one black sealed. She opens it carefully, lays it across a flat rock, and traces the symbols with her fingers. We'll camp here tonight, she says. No fire. The silver-haired man snorts. I'll miss the stew. Better to be hungry than seen, she replies. There's no argument. Just a quiet shuffling of gear as the group begins laying out bedrolls and silent wards. You help where you can, gathering stones, clearing brush, marking a perimeter with threads soaked in ash and salt. It's ritualistic but not exaggerated, efficient, focused. Quirky fact, certain orders, clandestine or otherwise, used still camps when near haunted or cursed ground. No fires, no metal striking stone, no spoken names. Everything done in signs, touch, or whispers. It wasn't about fear, it was about respect. You settle into your corner of the camp, bedroll tucked between two low boulders. The forest presses close. You still haven't seen the remains of Belmere. No houses, no church, no toppled fences. Just this nothingness where something should be. That's what chills you most. Not what you see, but what you don't. Brisa sits nearby, knees drawn up, sharpening a dagger in lazy arcs. It's the same one she had in the tavern, and the rhythm of the scrape is hypnotic. She doesn't speak for a long time, then softly, sometimes we find ruins, sometimes graves, sometimes just ash. And sometimes, you ask, she stops sharpening, looks up. Sometimes we find the people. You swallow. Alive? She doesn't say, doesn't need to. The night thickens, no stars, no moon, just the sound of your own breath and the wind slipping past trees that might remember more than they let on. You lie down, staring up through the branches, waiting for sleep that doesn't come. Somewhere in the blackness beyond the clearing you hear a sound. A bell. Once, but not from the tavern. This one comes from underground. You don't scream, you don't bolt upright. You just lie there, staring at the canopy of blackened branches overhead, and let the silence that follows the bell seep into your bones. It doesn't echo like the one from the tavern. This one is deeper, heavier, like it rang through stone, like it shook loose dust from bones that haven't moved in centuries. No one else in the camp moves, but you know they all heard it. You sit up slowly, movements deliberate, as if the air itself might snap if you shift too fast. Around you, the others are already alert. No one speaks. No one reaches for weapons. Not yet. But every eye is open, every hand close to a hilt or pouch or charm. Brisa doesn't look surprised. She just stares out toward the trees, mouth tight, body completely still, like a wolf that's caught the scent of something it hoped was extinct. You whisper, "That was from below." Brisa nods barely. "Is it a warning?" She glances at you, and the look in her eyes is colder than the wind crawling through the forest. "It's an invitation." You glance toward the old well. It hasn't moved, of course. Still a circle of crumbling stone choked with rot and leaves. Still as silent as before, but now it feels different. It's not a ruin anymore. It's a mouth, and it's open. The silver-haired man stands. His candle, long since extinguished, is in his hand again. He doesn't light it, just grips it like a tether. The others begin to pack in silence, not in a rush, but with the smooth efficiency of people who've been through this before. You're not sure what this is exactly, but you know it's no longer the approach. You've arrived. By the time the sun begins to nudge its way over the horizon, what little light it offers through the fog, the camp is packed. No breakfast, no fire, just dry bread chewed silently while everyone avoids looking at the well. You're the one who breaks the silence. So, what now? Brisa rises, shoulders squared. Now we find out if Belmere is still Belmere. The group forms up, not in a military line, but in a loose arc. Cautious, alert, covering ground without crowding it. You stay near Brisa, though you're not sure whether that's bravery or just the sense that standing near her is marginally safer than standing near anyone else. Together, you approach the well. At first, nothing changes, and then, as you draw within 10 feet, the air shifts. Not wind, weight. Like walking into a room where something horrible happened and the memory of it still clings to the walls. Your breath catches without your permission. Every part of your body feels like it's being watched. Not from the trees, not from above, but from beneath. The map bearer stops abruptly, points to the ground just past the well. There. You step around the stones and see it. A path, or what's left of one. Not a road. Not even a trail. Just depressions in the earth. Indentations in moss and weeds that form the vague outline of something man-made. A line of progress swallowed almost completely by time. The silver-haired man kneels and brushes aside a patch of dead leaves. Beneath is a stone, flat, wide, and carved. Not with words, but with a symbol. An X, same as the seal on your scroll. Brisa crouches beside it, traces the lines with her finger. Boundary marker, she says. We're past the threshold now. You glance at the others. No one moves, no one smiles. They just wait. Brisa stands. We follow the path. And so you do. The way forward is both impossibly obvious and maddeningly subtle. Where the forest seems to breathe denser, the trail moves through it. Every now and then you see another stone, another carved X, partially obscured by vines or sunken into wet earth. Once, you pass a twisted fence post wrapped in rusted wire. No fence attached. Just a fragment of a perimeter. Then the trees begin to thin, and the town appears. At first, it's just the outline of it. Foundations, really. Stones piled in a way that suggests houses once stood here. A sagging chimney, a half-buried well of its own, the skeleton of what might have been a small chapel, the cross long gone but the frame unmistakable. You're struck not by the destruction but by the lack of it. There's no fire damage, no signs of battle. No decay that fits the expected rot of abandonment. Just emptiness. As if everything that made this place alive simply stepped out, leaving the shell behind. Brisa whispers, "This is wrong." You nod. "Too clean." The group spreads out again, this time with blades drawn. The red-sashed woman holds a small glass orb in one hand. It pulses faintly, light blooming within it like a heartbeat. You drift toward what remains of the chapel. Inside, the altar is still intact. Stone, carved with symbols you don't recognize. The floor is covered in pine needles, no footprints, no ash, just silence. But above the altar, carved into the wall, you find something that stops your breath. Another X, but this one is inverted. Brisa appears behind you. Her voice is quiet. That's not ours. You stare. Then whose is it? She doesn't answer. Historically, certain symbols were inverted not as blasphemy, but as warnings. A reversal of a sacred shape often marked places where rituals went wrong or were never meant to be done in the first place. Inverted crosses, flipped runes, broken circles, signs of interruption, interference, and worse, invitation. Quirky footnote: in 1421, a Flemish chapel was discovered deep in the Ardennes, its walls covered in reverse sigils and scorched wax. No records remained of the village that built it. Just a single, unsigned entry in a bishop's log. Too quiet. The air inside moves without wind. Back outside, the group regathers. No one reports seeing people, no animals, no movement, just stone, just the marks. Red Sash speaks first. It's not abandoned, it's waiting. The others nod, and then finally you hear it again. The bell. One ring, then another, and another, 3 total. This time, it does echo. Through the ground. Through your chest. Through the hollowed-out spaces of what once was Belmere. You grip the scroll in your pocket. Brisa looks at you. It's your move now. You don't move right away. The third bell is still humming in your chest like it's trying to tune your heartbeat to its own rhythm. Slower, deeper, older. It's not a sound so much as a pressure, like a rope being pulled taut between your ribs and the earth below. The ground hasn't shifted, the sky hasn't darkened, the ruins haven't sprung to life, and yet everything around you feels different now, Tilted. Like the rules just changed and no one was polite enough to say so. Everyone is staring at you, not expectantly, not even curiously, just watching, like they're waiting to see whether you'll break. Brisa's the only one who steps forward. Her face is unreadable, though something behind her eyes flickers. Concern, maybe, or fatigue dressed up as professionalism. She stops a few feet from you, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her blade, not threatening, just prepared. 3 bells, she says quietly. First is a call, second is a threshold, third means you've been chosen. You swallow, your throat is dry. Chosen for what? To listen, she says, and maybe to remember. You reach into your coat pocket and pull out the scroll. The second one, the blue seal. It's warm to the touch, not in a natural way, not like body heat. More like it's been waiting for this moment to activate, like it knew when the bells would toll long before you did. Everyone is silent as you break the seal. The wax cracks like brittle bone. The parchment inside is smoother than the last, less aged, more recent. But the handwriting is the same, looping, deliberate, confident in a way that suggests it doesn't need to explain itself. You read it aloud. You don't know why. It just feels right, feels expected. To the bearer of this sign you begin, your voice hoarse but steady. You are the vessel of memory. The seal is broken. The story must be told. The parchment pulses in your hands, not with light, but with presence, like it's reacting to your voice. You continue. Belmere was not erased. It was hidden, not by war, nor plague, nor fire, but by silence. Brisa inhales sharply. Those who remained were not lost. They were buried, not beneath stone, but beneath forgetting. And now, as the bell tolls thrice, the silence falters. The wound opens. The story leaks. Your voice cracks, not from emotion, from weight. You must go to the centre, speak the name, let them hear it again. You lower the scroll, it's blank now. The ink faded the moment the last word left your mouth. Behind you, the others stir. The centre, the silver-haired man murmurs. The map-bearer steps forward, unrolling a brittle, yellowed parchment and pinning it down with stones. It's a layout, faded but intact. You lean over it with the others. There, he points, town centre. If the layout held, the well we passed was the southern edge. That means the square's just over this ridge. Brisa nods. And the chapel was due east. Makes sense. You glance back toward the ruined church. The inverted X still looms over the altar like a brand. You try not to think about it too long. Everyone begins to move. No orders, no hesitations, just motion. You walk now, feet crunching softly over pine needles and dead grass. No animals stir, no birds call. It's like sound is afraid to touch this place. You reach the ridge after a few minutes. It's not steep, just enough to conceal what lies beyond. The trees thin even more here, forming a kind of corridor that might have once been a road. At the top you stop, and there it is, the square, but not as a ruin, not as a ghost. It's intact. Buildings rise from the earth like they never left. Stone facades, wooden signs, shutters creaking gently in a wind that doesn't blow. It looks real, too real. Like the town was plucked from memory and set back down here whole. An echo, Brisa whispers, or a trap. You all descend slowly, boots quiet, weapons drawn. The buildings have no lights in their windows, but their doors are closed. Not broken, not weathered. Closed. You pass what looks like a bakery. The smell of stale flour clings to the air. A tailor's shop, a blacksmith. Even a tavern, smaller, older, with the name The Thorned Bell, barely legible on a hanging sign. You reach the centre of the square, and then you see them. Figures. Still. Standing in a perfect circle around an old fountain. Each of them facing inward. Unmoving. Silent. You count 12. They're not statues. Not quite. They don't gleam. They don't crack. But they're not people either. More like remnants. Shades. Their clothes are frozen mid-flutter as though caught by a gust that never passed. Their eyes are closed. Their faces peaceful. You take a step closer. The others fan out, cautious. The red-sashed woman whispers, "Are they the villagers?" Brisa doesn't answer. You circle the fountain. The water inside is black and still, not reflective, not even wet, just dark, like ink that never dried. The scroll's weight returns in your hand. You don't remember lifting it again, but there it is, and with it, a sudden bone-deep knowing. This is the moment. Speak the name, Brisa says behind you. You open your mouth, but there's a problem. You don't know it. You don't know the name. Not yours, not theirs, not Belmir's, not anymore. You blink. Panic prickles your scalp. The silence tightens. And then, one of the figures opens their eyes. Just one. They're pale, not glowing, just empty. They look at you and speak. A name. Not in a whisper. Not in a scream. Just one word. The one that was stolen. The one you now remember. And as they say it, so do the others. All 12, in unison. The name rolls over you like thunder. Like waves. Like history dragging itself back into the present. You collapse to your knees, hands clamped over your ears, but the name doesn't stop ringing inside you. And then, silence. You open your eyes. The figures are gone. The fountain is dry. The buildings are ruins again. Belmir has returned to death. But not forgetting. You remember now. You always will. You sit there on the cracked stones of the square, the memory of the name still echoing through your skull like it's bouncing from wall to wall, refusing to be quiet. It's not a name you've ever heard before, not in stories, not in whispered warnings or half-spoken myths, but the moment it was said it clicked into place inside you like a lost key in the right lock. The sound of it. It was old, not in years, in weight, like it had once held something closed, and now that it's been spoken, that door is open again. The others approach slowly, not cautiously. They saw it too. They felt it. Brisa is first. Her boots scuff gently against the cobbled stones as she kneels beside you, hand on your shoulder. Her grip is solid, grounding. "You all right?" she asks softly. You nod, then shake your head. "I don't know," she smiles faintly. That's the honest answer. You glance around. The town is back to what it should be, or what it became. The illusion is gone. The buildings have slumped into themselves. The fountain is shattered. Even the signs are unreadable now, worn down to splinters and rusted nails. Belmir is ruins again. Real ruins. No more than an echo with a pulse. You rise, legs trembling but holding. The others regroup silently. No one claps your back. No one cheers. They're professionals, or something like it. And this wasn't a victory. Not yet. Just a step. A necessary wound reopened. Brisa brushes dust from her knees. We need to move. We're exposed now. To what? You ask, your voice still raw. She looks toward the well in the distance. To whatever comes next. The silver-haired man unrolls the map again, his fingers tracing lines you can't see. We have the name now. That's our next marker. The memory's been spoken aloud. The tether's been remade. Tether, you echo? Belmere wasn't lost, Redsash says, adjusting the wrap across her chest. It was hidden, anchored in silence. That silence protected it, but it also caged it. The name was the lock. You stare at them. And now we've unlocked it? Not just unlocked it, Brisa says. We've made it part of the story again. A chill runs down your spine. You didn't ask to be a storyteller. You didn't come here with a sword or a prophecy or even a plan. But now there's a weight in your chest. Like the name settled somewhere deep and built a nest, you can't forget it. You won't. That's the deal, isn't it? You speak the name, you carry the burden. You glance down at the scroll and still blank, but heavier than ever. We should burn it, you say. No, Brisa replies immediately. You don't burn truth, you carry it. You don't like that answer. You don't argue. The team packs quickly. No chatter, no complaints, just quiet movement, like they're already bracing for the next chapter. You help where you can, rolling blankets, tightening saddle straps, pretending your hands aren't still shaking. As you all begin to walk out of the town square because no one wants to ride through this place, you notice something new. Just outside the chapel ruins, beneath a collapsed beam, there's a fresh carving. You pause, crouch, brush aside the debris. It's the same symbol, the X. But this time, it's not inverted, and beside it, one word etched into the stone in that same looping hand you've now seen on multiple scrolls. Remember. Brisa sees you looking, says nothing, just touches your arm gently, then moves on. You follow. The path away from Belmere isn't the same as the one you arrived on. The map leads you north now, towards something called the Archive. No one explains what that is. No one needs to. You get the sense it's not a building, or a vault, or a library, not in the traditional sense. It's a place where things go when they shouldn't be forgotten. The ride is silent. The trees don't watch this time. The wind is soft again. The land, while still unnerving, no longer feels held in suspense, like something has been released, like a breath held too long has finally been exhaled. You reach a ridge that overlooks the valley. The town is just a dot now, half shadowed by trees, still, cold, but visible, and that's the part that makes your stomach drop. Because before it wasn't. Before Belmere was hidden, protected, lost in the folds of time like a misplaced coin in a deep pocket. But now you can see it. Even from here, you ask, will others find it? Brisa doesn't answer right away. They will, she says at last. Some won't even know what they found. And what happens then? She turns her head just slightly. That depends on the next bell. You look at her. There's a fourth? She doesn't nod. Doesn't shake her head either. Some say there's always one more, she says. One that doesn't ring through the air but through the bones. The bell you hear right before something begins again. You don't like the sound of that. But then again, you're starting to realise this isn't a story that ends. It just moves, changes form, finds another teller, another listener, another place that forgot something it shouldn't have. You glance down at your blank parchment. Still clean, still waiting. You feel it again. That strange pressure behind your ribs. Not fear, not exactly, just weight. The weight of being part of something now. A witness, a participant, a keeper. Quirky fact. In some regions of medieval Europe, bell towers were built with no bells, empty steeples standing watch over ghost towns. Locals believed they used to hold bells, long since taken by those who could still hear them. The ones who followed them were never seen again. Some called them pilgrims, others fools. But the wise? They called them rememberers. As the group rides on, the trees grow taller. The sun begins to fade behind low clouds, and somewhere ahead, in the mist, the land rises sharply into cliffs. That's where you're going next, toward the Archive, whatever it is, whoever's waiting there. Brisa rides ahead, leading the way. You follow. The scroll's warmth returns, and behind you, far behind, the ruins of Belmere settle into silence. But this time, it's a silence that remembers. So now here you are, wrapped in the grey-blue quiet of night, blinking against the last embers of a fire you didn't build, in a place you never meant to reach. Your boots are off. Your legs are sore in the kind of way that means you really did something, walked somewhere you weren't supposed to, maybe even came back different. And the name, still in your chest, still there, still echoing softly like someone humming a lullaby in the next room over. But now it's gentler, not so much a weight as a warmth. Familiar, like a name you forgot you loved. You've left Belmere behind, but it hasn't left you. That's how stories work. They burrow, they shift shape, they move with you whether you invite them or not. Even now, in this quiet wind-down moment, you can still feel the way the silence stretched out over those ruins, how the bell's toll wasn't a warning but a key, and you, poor thing, you just happened to be holding the lock. Funny how that works. Brisa said you'd understand more in time, that remembering isn't about facts but presence. Maybe she's right, maybe not. But tonight, as the shadows lean long and the moon sits fat and pale above the trees, you feel something new in your bones. Not dread, not even wonder, just the sense that something was put back where it belongs. A thread retied, a silence broken. You'll sleep soon, or try to. Might be hard with your mind still full of forgotten towns, sealed scrolls and ghost-thick wells, but let that be okay. Let yourself drift slowly, like a leaf on still water. The hard part's over for now. You carried the name, you told the story. You were brave in ways no one will ever fully understand. So go ahead, close your eyes, let the bells go quiet, let the woods grow dark, let yourself rest. Sweet dreams, rememberer.